All right, how are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganzi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Now, guys, real quick, I do have a microphone. Some of the Duty Ron people believed I should be getting a microphone because they were having trouble hearing my voice. So I bought a microphone. I hope it works. If not, let me know, and I'll just go back to where I was prior. I think I did whatever I could to get rid of some of those echoes. All right, so guys, it's going to be an interesting show. I'm going to have Toby Dorr on. If you guys are not familiar with her, Toby Dorr, a young woman at the time. She helped an inmate escape out of a prison in Kansas. She's going to tell you the story. I'm not even going to tell you how she helped him to escape. I think this is her story to tell. And then she's also going to tell you how she was manipulated into doing that, how she fell in love with the inmate, and how her story, what was going on at home, could have affected how this inmate was able to employ that game. And I thought this was a great topic to have because it's very similar to what we have going on with Vicky White. And I think the best people to kind of explain this are the people that have lived it. Now, guys, this is a video that's going to be very informative. It's a video that it answers our questions, yes, of course, but it's also going to be very informative for correctional staff, because it does happen. So what I do ask for is for this young woman, when she comes on, she's sharing a story in an effort to learn from her mistakes. You know, we're all human. We make mistakes. I'm asking that we give this young lady the utmost respect. I have Alicia B. She's going to be helping me out, making sure that the questions are respectful. And again, she's willing to answer anything. She is willing to answer anything because she wants to tell her story. And I think this will be a good treat for the Duty Ron audience who are true crime. And now it's Tier Talk family, by the way. So I just want to give my shout out to my boy Duty Ron. Duty Ron I may have him try to come in a little bit later on. He's going to want to come in anyway because we got Connie today. Connie will be in shortly. I just want to announce my 3 sponsors before we get started. I have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, please check out American Military University. If you're looking for a degree, get higher education. American Military University is very supportive of what we do in corrections and obviously very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk. I also have Guardian RFID from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit Guardian RFID for more information. We do post up content for that. It's just usually more training videos. If you guys are interested, check it out. And we have Shea USA. Now, guys, mind you, Shea USA is spelled CEIA. They're the #1 world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert, and he is passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. And also, Inmate Manipulation Decoded is on the market. If you guys want to get an understanding of how the game is played, how inmates can employ it based on vulnerabilities that we may not even know exist, based on situations that can be created, Inmate Manipulation is a great book to get. All right, so no further ado, let me go ahead and bring up the second star. Well, actually, probably the first star. I'm second to her. Connie Eileen. What's up, Connie? How excited are you today? First off, let me just also thank Russ Hamilton. Russ was the one that actually originated the connection. I was going to see if he was going to come on tonight, but he's a little tied up driving from Reno. So Russ Hamilton, thank you. I appreciate this. Okay, Connie, sorry about that.
Hi, everybody. Connie here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage with Sir Cocoon. I am so excited to have this conversation tonight, to really firsthand be able to talk with someone who has been through sort of that manipulation process and really just understand her story more in detail, because, you know, a lot of times we speculate about what was happening or what could have happened. And this time we actually have someone who can explain exactly what happened in their situation.
And okay, Eric is saying Connie's not a nurse. She's a healthcare administrator. Guys, I know. I messed up. I know. And guys, if you get a chance, before I bring Toby on, please, guys, again, please be respectful. And if you guys don't mind, like and share this stuff if you can. All right, so Toby, first off, let me thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure having you. And by the way, guys, I called only a few hours ago, so she was willing to come on. I did a Connie on her, you know, or I did a Connie. But hey, Toby, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name's Toby Dorr, and Right now, I live outside of Washington, D.C., but at the time of the escape, I was living in the Kansas City area.
All right. And guys, remember, keep the questions coming. We're going to start the dialogue, but I'm doing this for you guys. So whatever questions you want to have answered, Toby is willing to answer those questions. But I believe without further ado, I think we should hear her story, just kind of like the generalized story. What happened? Where did it happen? I mean, how did you get into corrections? Let's start that way first. How did you get into corrections?
In 2004, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I had thyroid cancer and had to have my thyroid removed. And having cancer is kind of a wake-up call. And I looked at my life and I said, I haven't done anything to change the world. I haven't made a difference by being here. So I want to find something that I can do that will make a difference. And I have always been a dog lover, and I was working part-time at a vet clinic. And the vet clinic I worked at, the stray dogs came into that clinic from the small town we were in. And so I decided I'd start a dog rescue program. And within just a couple of days of starting my program, an officer from the warden's office at the men's prison just up the highway came and asked me if I would consider starting a prison dog program, because their inmates were looking for someone to come in and bring dogs in that they could train. And I was thrilled to death to do that. So they asked me on a Monday, and I met with the warden on a Wednesday, and on Friday I took dogs into the prison. So it all happened pretty quick, and I just kind of built the prison dog program as I went. And it was a really successful program. We started out with 7 dogs, and in the 18 months I ran the program, we rescued 1,000 dogs. And these were all dogs that were going to be put to sleep if I didn't take them. So,
and how, when you got into the system, did you have any training in dealing with the inmate population?
I went through their volunteer training. So I did go through the volunteer training, but I turned out to not be a normal volunteer, because I had dogs in max custody, medium custody, and minimum custody. And I needed to be able to get in and see the dogs if something happened to them or if they were sick. So I had pretty free reign to go anywhere I wanted in the prison at any time. And I was not ever escorted either. So I really had a lot of freedom inside the prison.
Now, Connie, actually, she has a school that teaches civilians kind of how to adapt to their role in corrections. Connie, do you believe that is something that civilians should be going through before they enter the profession, like some level of training?
So absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we do at the Academy is really focus on our own personal vulnerabilities and try to identify what areas in our lives within ourselves that could actually make us vulnerable to inmate manipulation. And sometimes it's a matter of just putting that mirror in front of you, right? Like, let me do some reflection on myself. There's some questions that we ask that, aren't typically asked when you go through the interview process or an onboarding process. And certainly, I don't think there are questions that are asked when a volunteer comes in. So, one of the things that I think it sounds like is that the focus was really on your expertise in handling the dogs and not so much on sort of the inmate politics that you would also have to try to navigate as you go through the system.
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Toby. You have something you want to say on that?
I just said I agree with what Connie said. I don't think I had nearly enough training for the amount I spent. I probably spent 7 to 8 hours a day inside the prisons doing different work. I mean, I was there a lot. It wasn't like a volunteer that comes in for an hour and teaches a typing class or a Bible study. It was a lot more in depth than that.
Did you find that you spent more time with the inmates than you did with like support staff?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And did the inmates know that you were kind of isolated by yourself technically?
Well, I mean, anybody who was in the prison would have known that. They saw me. I just walked in and walked around, and I walked out, and I came in at all times of the day and night. So I think it was pretty obvious.
Were you always like with the animals? Like when you walked in with an animal, or there was places on the compound where the animals were kind of housed? And while you with both, okay.
So both. So if I was bringing a new dog in, or if I was bringing a dog back from a vet appointment, I would walk in with the dog. But if I was coming in for a dog training class, or to, just walk around and get a status of how the dogs were doing, or maybe to tend to a dog's wound or something, we took in dogs that like got thrown off bridges and things like that. So there was a lot of medical attention that needed to happen to them while they were in there. So I could walk in without a dog and spend all my time, doing something with the dogs inside the prison.
What was it like? What was the setup for you dealing with the inmates? How many inmates did you have in your program at one time, and how long could they stay in the program?
They could stay in the program indefinitely. There was no rule about they could only be in the program for so long and they had to leave. And I had 100 dog handlers at a time. They were spread through different parts of the prison, though.
And how were they filtered to be in the program? What was the criteria?
The warden's office filtered them. They had to fill out a request form and submit it to their unit team. And their unit team leader had to sign off on it. And then it went to the warden's office and the warden signed off on it. And then they could be in the program.
So I think that specifically though, like, was there like a criteria that they had to meet in order to qualify to be a part of the program? Like, good behavior for X amount of time, or no, violent offenses or anything?
I'm sure that there was a criteria, but I wasn't a part of that. They just told me this is your new dog handler, or here's a new dog handler for you. I didn't have any part in picking who the dog handlers were or how they were chosen. But I do know that they, if they got into trouble or something, they got a write-up, then I think it took them out of the dog program. So they did have to be on good behavior.
There's a good question coming through, both from Peter Jones and actually, I'm curious about this too, Trucker Steve. As a civilian, did you have access to the whole compound without an escort, or did you have to be escorted everywhere you went?
I had access to the whole compound without an escort.
So what was your daily?
Except for SAG. I didn't go into SAG, but everywhere else, lockdown, I didn't go there, but everywhere else I had access to.
So what was your daily routine? You come into work, and how did your routine start? Like, what was your beginning of the day to the end of the day routine?
Well, usually I'd start my days by picking up dogs that had to go to vet appointments and get spayed or neutered. And I'd drop them off at the vet clinics. And then I'd come back into the prison and we would do some dog training, or I'd answer questions that specific dog handlers might have. And then I'd go pick up dogs at the vets at the end of the day and return them to the prison. And then, during the day, I would spend a lot of time going to different animal shelters or meeting dog transports coming from out of town to bring up me dogs for the program.
Right. And then now throughout the day, obviously you had many interactions. Did you only interact with the inmates that were in the program, or did you have interactions with inmates that were outside the program?
I mostly interacted with inmates in the program, but when I walked into the yard, all the men that were out in the yard, they would all say, "Hey, hi, dog lady," and so, I could have a conversation with any of them if I wanted to, but mostly I interacted with the dog handlers.
See, so for me, obviously, and I think some of the custody staff would see that as a concern, obviously. I mean, we would like to limit your interaction to only the inmates that are involved in the program, and we wouldn't like any inmate directly walking up to you. I know for most state facilities, there are separate movements for inmates and for civilians. Inmates will move at one time and civilians will move at another.
But can I ask a question before you finish that? Because when you said that you would come in and out, like say you'd go for an appointment, you come back, were you going through security when you came through?
Yes, I did. I went through security when I come in and out, and I had to, stop at the control center and show them my ID, and then they'd open the door and let me go in.
Right, but did they actually frisk you or go through like, no?
No, they didn't.
Yeah, see, so I mean, obviously, it's 2006, but that's always a big concern. There's levels of complacency because people build familiarity between,
Mm-hmm.
the inmates, also even the civilians. So my thing is, well, we'll get to the part when we start to get to the game that's being played eventually. But can we talk about your interactions with the inmates in general? The young lady had a question. She wanted to go. This question, Alicia B. Did you feel like prisoners were respectful, or did any of them make you feel uncomfortable?
I felt for the most part they were very respectful. And I was always amazed at how respectful they were and polite. There was one instance when I was walking around inside the prison and I could hear this group of inmates saying, "Oh, I'd like to get hold of her," and stuff like that. And that made me uncomfortable. And I reported it to the warden's office. And I didn't have that happen again.
Sorry about that. I have to plug in. I have to charge. Connie, can you cover it for a second while I charge you?
Sure, no problem. So, I mean, I think this is a great story only because, when we sort of retrospect, right, we see how, systems can break down and how, an unintended consequence, we could see it ultimately. But I'm curious too, as I know you're going to go into detail about the manipulation side, were there other things that the inmate had you do other than get him out? Like before then, did you bring me this, give me that?
I brought him a cell phone. I did bring a cell phone in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
About maybe 2 weeks before the escape. It wasn't, very long before, but I did bring in a cell phone. But that was the only thing I did. Yeah.
At the time, did you know that was something that you shouldn't do? Or was that never a conversation, contraband, or because you were there specifically for the animals, did they never visit that aspect of what's permissible or not permissible?
I knew I shouldn't have brought a cell phone in. I knew when I brought the cell phone in that it was not, it was the beginning of, agreeing to the escape. And I knew it was something I shouldn't have done.
Let me ask. So when you first you start building your interaction with the gentleman, what was his first name? Jason? Is it Jason Menard?
John. It was John.
John Menard. Yes. When you built your relationship, well, first off, let's start with that first. What was your first interaction with? Was he already, you started the program. So was he one of the first people that was in your program?
He came into I started the program in August and he came into the program in about October.
Right. So then what was your first interaction like with him?
So I was walking through the prison to go to a press conference. They had brought in a bunch of media to present the dog program to the media. And he walked across the yard and walked right up to me and reached out and shook my hand and introduced himself and said, I need to be in your dog program. I'm probably the best dog handler in the prison. And I said, well, you just need to fill out a form, and give it to your unit team. I don't have anything to do with picking dog handlers. And then a couple of weeks later, I went in and they said, I have 7 new dog handlers for you. And so when the dog handlers came out and I went to give him a dog, he was one of the dog handlers.
Let me ask, was it normal has any other inmate ever come up to you, shook your hand and try to get into the program that way? I mean, that's why we
love they did. Not often, but it was not uncommon.
Yeah, that's why
they come up and they ask.
Our thought process was in the same space. I was just thinking, did anyone intervene when he came to shake your hand? Because even if you don't know, the other people around you know or should know.
How did that make you feel when he shook your hand? Did you feel that was appropriate?
I felt like it was appropriate. I didn't feel like it was, it didn't scare me or anything. And it didn't feel awkward because I'd had other inmates come up and shake my hand and say, we love this dog program that you're doing. So I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, because the concern with me would be just that immediate interaction, how they could just walk up to you. I mean, this is a gentleman so here for me is when you have that criteria for whatever program it is, that criteria doesn't only mean for the benefits of the dog, but also for the civilians that are going to be involved in that program. So for any inmate to kind of walk up directly, it's kind of like, wow, that's a little bit lax, because these inmates should not have access to you again, because you're part of that program. So it was unique. Now, you said that you told him that he could, and by the way, thank you, Toby. It's amazing how honest you are. I'm telling you, the dialogue here, if people listen to the dialogue, they're going to see that there is something beneficial at the other end. But so for the gentleman that you said you had no no influence on getting him into the program, correct?
That's right.
So how did he find his way? You get through the warden. Warden was able to
Well, I told him the same thing I told anybody else who asked me how they could get in the program. And it was, you have to go talk to your unit team leader and have him fill out a form for you. So that was the process, is the way I knew it. And so if anyone asked me how they could get in the dog program, that's what I would tell them.
So nothing stood out yet. So we don't have someone that you're immediately physically attracted to, correct?
Right. That's correct.
So,
that was about a year before that happened.
Now, I just want to make sure so people know that this wasn't something physical, because then you said you would have probably felt something on that handshake, a physical attraction, but there was no physical attraction.
That's correct. That's correct.
So, Connie, what's your thoughts on that real quick, Connie? Because I wanted to get that out there to let people know that this is a game that may go past just the physical. This is a game that's more about a mental play. So not having that physical attraction matters, correct?
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think that the physical attraction really matters in this instance where, the guy may be seeing an opportunity. I mean, I think the handshake was like just the beginning. So if you are allowed to break that touch barrier, I think it really does open the door to the possibility for more in the inmates' minds. Because I think in our traditional mindset, right, like there's nothing wrong with the handshake. It's respectful. It's appropriate. You would never think anything about it. But I think in this instance, when we are talking about inmates and the process of manipulation, that the touch barrier, I think, is a major one. But I think it's good to know, even as we think about we hear the story, right, and sort of where it goes. I think it's interesting or important to put out there that there was no physical attraction, and that this process really was just a mental one. And maybe it did evolve into something physical after a time, but that's after, I'm thinking, you already have some sort of emotional connection to that person.
Well, that's what I was gonna mention something. So obviously, I believe there was something at the home life that the inmate could have been aware was a vulnerability, maybe something in the situation at home that they were able to slowly introduce whatever that game was. So some of the people right now are asking about the home life. Does the home life play into the inmate's game?
Well, it did. And about a year after I started the prison dog program, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he was the center of our world, all of us in our family. And it was a really difficult thing to go through. Excuse me, I've got a cold here. Hold on just a minute. So my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and it was devastating. And one night he got called in, or he'd had his bladder removed, and then he went into they took him back to the ICU, and he got really sick, and they had to rush him back to surgery because they'd nicked his colon. And so we had to run back to the hospital like at midnight, and I was there all night in the waiting room. And he came out of that surgery okay, but it was very difficult and emotional. And so when I left the prison, I drove back. And when I left the hospital, I drove back to the prison to do my work for the day, to pick up dogs and take them to the vets. And when I walked into the prison, John was there. I mean, I just happened to run into him in the yard, and he said, "Toby, what's wrong with you? You are really upset. What's going on?" And I said, "Well, I've been at the hospital all night, because my dad had emergency surgery." And he said, "Well, it's a good thing your husband was there with you, because that's a tough thing. And to have to drive home after that, you're lucky that you have a husband to help you." And I said, "Well, he didn't come to the hospital, because he said, there's no sense in both of us missing sleep. So I'm just going to stay home and sleep and you go on to the hospital. And so I think that kind of is when things started to change because, you know, it just, the attention from John, I feel like for most of my life, I'd been invisible and I'd worked hard. I worked so hard. I worked all the time to show myself, to, you know, to do something that makes a difference. And nobody noticed still. But then here's this John noticed that I was going through something, and it just felt like, you know, pouring water on a dying plant, that, you know, finally in my life, somebody noticed how I was feeling. And I think that's when everything started to change.
Can I ask a quick question? Okay. What time was this when you went back to the facility?
It was probably like 8 a.m. or something like that.
Can I ask something too? So a couple of people picked up on this. Again, we do have some people from the corrections profession. One of them said first name basis. Definitely opens the door for trouble.
I wasn't calling him by his first name. I'm just calling him that now as I tell the story. Because
but did he call you that? He called you by your first name?
He did call me Toby. All the inmates called me Toby or the dog lady. I don't think anybody called me anything else. But I called him Maynard. I called him by his last name.
All right. So basically the thing with us, and we always have, this is great for the person to even bring up this question, and thank you for answering, Toby. The cool part about this all is we do believe, like, even by calling an inmate by the first name or them calling you by the first name, it does have a little bit of a barrier. I've only used first names a few times. It's usually an effort to calm the inmate down. And I literally can count how many times I've done that in my career, you know, just as an effort to, like, maybe the inmate knows me enough to where I can build that rapport. So if there's a concern happening, they're starting to act up, but they've never in return, obviously, used my first name. I know for civilian, it may be a little bit different, but I would believe that it would be best that they would either call you by your title or Mrs. Door, or I would even the dog handler would be better than Toby. But I think, but I wanted to ask you something. How did it get to that point where the inmate was just comfortable enough to even ask you about, you know, are you okay? What happened last night? And then for you to open up that dialogue about what happened. And then when he mentions your husband, how are you comfortable at that point to even start talking about your husband?
You know, maybe I was naive. I don't know, but I never felt, you know, guarded when I was at the prison. You know, I just was, you know, genuinely interested in the dog handlers and their dogs and whatever questions they needed answered in order to do their job and, you know, help me save this dog's life. I just, I never felt afraid inside the prison. You know, it was just different.
Yeah. I think that the unique thing is that, and tell me if you would agree, or maybe Connie, your perspective too, is I think when you said that you had a concern, let's say with your dad, God rest his soul, I'm assuming your father had passed.
He did. Yeah.
All right. So God rest his soul, by the way. I don't want to be cold as I explain this. But I think he used that and then opened up the discussion with your husband to kind of test you to see where you're at with your husband. Correct? Would you agree with that?
I think perhaps that could have been the case, but I did feel, you know, as our relationship grew, I did feel like John loved me. And, you know, I didn't feel like he was using me. I felt like he truly cared about me. So
someone, we kind of like, he was prying for information. I feel like he figured this was someone he could manipulate. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because some people may think, you know what, if there's an open door, but as you said, if you felt he loved you, you felt that his question was sincere. Did you ever feel uncomfortable about talking about your husband to an inmate?
No, I didn't. I never did. And you know, I don't think that I felt like John loved me that day. I mean, it took, you know, a couple more months, you know, before I felt that way.
So can we talk about how the relationship grew, and then we can kind of just maybe kind of talk about those slow and subtle steps, and just to let people know real quick, and I'm sure Connie may want to comment on this too. The reason why the steps are very slow and subtle is because an inmate knows that if they go right for that extreme, if they go right for that favor, right for that final request, most people will be a wake-up call. So what they look to do is they look to build some consistency within those small steps, enough so that the person doesn't even know they're moving towards that.
Mhm.
And then finally, they're going to offer that leverage where it's like, are you going to do this? Or if not, now this may not happen because, again, this is a different type of relationship. For here, there was an offer of protection. Now, I'm assuming if there was an offer of protection, then there's an offer of trust from your end, correct? So did he offer? Well, let's detail that relationship. I think a lot of people in the audience would like to know how this relationship really started and how did it get to the point where, even to help him escape, how was that even brought to the table? Like, how did he even ask that?
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. So as our relationship developed, and when it got to the point where I felt like I was in love with him and that he was in love with me, then he asked me, if I wasn't in prison, would you be with me? And I said, I might, I might. And he took that as, well, now I need to get out of prison. And I just meant it as like, yeah, if you weren't in prison, maybe I would be with you. I don't know. So
what if I may ask, because I want to make sure we get to that point. Let's do this. First off, there's gonna be two questions here, if I may, Toby. And if you I think there's an order to this. What made him first different than every other inmate? And then we'll go with what made him different than every other man. So let's go first. What made him different than any other inmate? What made him stand out?
What made him stand out is that he was really smart. He was intelligent. And I used to have challenging conversations with him about dog training methods, and he would say, I think, how about if we train our dogs this way? And I'd say, no, I don't think that way. I don't like that way because of this reason. And we would have these discussions that I felt were more in depth and more interesting than discussions with the other dog handlers who would just, if I told them to jump 6 times, they would just jump 6 times. They didn't have a personality. They just kind of were willing to do whatever, they didn't stand out in any way. And John did stand out. He was smart and he had charisma and he was charming, I think. And he was just interesting to have a conversation with. And he challenged the way I thought. Not like he came out and challenged it, but these discussions with him about, different dog training methods or, the Chiefs football team or whatever we talked about, I was always challenged by what he had to say. And it made me, go home and think about how I felt about whatever it was we'd been talking about. And it was just kind of found to be an interesting conversation.
I think Connie, is it? Let me ask you a question.
I'm like bubbling over here. I'm like, oh my God. So he was able to find commonality.
I was just gonna
us to always have something in common to talk about. So whether it was the dogs or it was sports, it was something. You spoke to him enough for him to have enough content to, even if he wasn't really interested, he could go figure it out if he needed to.
Wait, where was the YouTuber and Connie just there? Connie just said content. You meant commonality or something, like
no. I meant that like he was getting enough information from her, enough content to really establish that commonality, to go back and be like, oh my goodness, so she's into this team, or she's into whatever, and what other things do I need to learn about animals so that we can continue to engage however we're getting closer here. But I think the other thing that I thought was really cool is that he aside from establishing the commonality, he has you thinking about him at home, which is like, wow, you're thinking about him not in the context of being in the prison, which I think is very telling that, because usually, once you leave the job, right? Like, especially when you're thinking about it, like, I left work now and now I'm home, you kind of shift gears into kind of like home life and whatever's going on there. So for him to have any of that real estate in your mind when you're not in the context of work, I think is really interesting that he was able to get that close to you.
And yeah, I want to. Can I compliment something that Connie's saying too? Because Connie made with the commonality and 100%. The commonality could be a way to push you out of your prescribed role. Like we can connect on this and this, so you no longer see me as an inmate. One of the questions here from Andre White, and I don't know if we did say, what was he in prison for?
He was in prison for felony murder.
Felony murder, right? So I like what Connie had mentioned with the commonality and trying to take you out of your prescribed role. Did you feel that this discussion with him was something that was okay, that was actually normal routine? Did you see any of the officers having this same type of dialogue with inmates? Like, was there anything to deter you from having this type of dialogue?
Not really. Not at that point. I mean, it seemed like I saw officers having conversations with my dog handlers quite often. And they would, go into the inmate's cell with the dog and check out how things were going. And I was with them a lot of times when they did that. And they would just have conversations about them and conversations about their dog and conversations about, their families and things like that. So I didn't feel that it was different for me than it was for anybody else, really.
So there are some great questions coming in. If I can, first off, Brenda says, "So sorry about your dad, Toby.
Thanks.
You losing your parents really difficult. Did you feel he knew that shift in you and made his move on you during your grieving over your dad?"
Well, I do think he felt that shift in me. And I do think that that's when our relationship started to change. I never did feel like he was making a move on me. I felt like he genuinely cared about what I was going through.
And did a question from Alicia actually was a good question. How did he make you? Were you ever okay with his crime? Did he claim he was framed, or did he take onus?
He never claimed he was framed, but he didn't kill anybody. He was with a friend of his. He and a friend of his were stealing a car, and there happened to be somebody in the car when they stole it, and they didn't know that. And the friend that he was with had a gun and shot the person that was in the car.
All right. And then let me ask, just trying to build up the question.
So I didn't feel like John was a murderer. I felt like he was making bunches of mistakes for stealing a car and for hanging out with who he was hanging out with. But I never did see him as a murderer because he never killed anybody.
It's a great choice of word you said there, as mistake, as opposed to actually committing the crime. I notice even when we deal with inmates, sometimes they'll minimize their responsibility towards something by saying mistake. Do you feel that the word mistake is maybe a way for you to minimize what they've done, which allows that open relationship with that inmate?
I don't know. I feel like, and having been in prison myself, I feel like the biggest mistake any of us can make is who we hang out with. When you hang out with the wrong people, you get mixed up in things that you wouldn't get mixed up in if you were hanging out with a better crowd of people. So I don't know that John said that was a mistake for who he hung out with. That's my view of his crime. He made a big mistake by hanging out with somebody who was carrying a gun and up to no good. But
do you think how you see it and how you may justify it could affect how you see him?
Yes, I think so. So.
Connie, what's your thoughts on that, Connie?
So that's what I was thinking. I was like, sometimes if you can kind of see the person as a victim of their circumstances, as opposed to them actually committing a crime, right? Because I think having sat and talked to many inmates, many of them said it wasn't me. I was only there. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, I'm hearing all of the various justifications. And so as I'm listening to Toby, I'm kind of thinking, was there a point where he was sort of planting some of those seeds that not so much that he's innocent, but like he's not a bad person, or like there was, because I just have to feel like there's a way that he figured out how to neutralize the fact that he was an inmate.
Hey, Connie, that's great. Was there? I agree. Like for the audience here, so they know, kind of get. Was there ever a moment when you stopped seeing him as an inmate?
The day of the escape, I didn't see him as an inmate, but then,
Wow.
That's powerful. So
Yeah.
let me ask. So obviously this, let's say as the relationship is developing, you're getting kind of close to him or whatever. Does nobody see this, or how are you able to get this close to him? How are you able to develop this relationship without anybody seeing it happen, not even the other inmates?
That was really a tough thing to do. And I'm amazed that it happened. I do think that, when I brought in the cell phone, that was a game changer, because then we could talk on the phone and nobody could see us. So
How did he like, so let me ask a question about the cell phone. So the cell phone is going to be a question that you have to break the rules, correct? And I mean, we know
Right.
that. And then he knows he's asking you now to break the rules, which basically says you can get in trouble and these will be the consequences. So when he asked you for the cell phone, did you feel that he still respected you when he asked that? Or do you feel that he still loved you when he asked for that?
I felt uncomfortable him asking me to bring in the cell phone, and I didn't want to bring it in, but yes, I got arrested. I didn't want to bring it in, but he, convinced me that it'd be better than if him buying one. So, I didn't willingly bring in the cell phone, but I did agree to bring it in, and I brought it in. So
there was a little kickback on your end. So now let's do this too, because this is curious too. Maybe Connie could think about it. So they ask you for the cell phone, there's so many steps to do that before you actually bring the cell phone in. At any moment in time, did you kind of say, what am I doing and why am I doing this?
I think by the time that I had agreed to bring in the cell phone, that I was too far gone.
Really?
Because at that point you were already emotionally invested in this person.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Someone asked, was that the first time he tested you when he asked for the cell phone?
Yes.
So he never asked you to bring in anything else before then?
No, he didn't.
How long were you guys? When would you consider this a relationship? How long of I guess when you first met him to when you figure it was a relationship between you and him that was undue? How long from that first interaction?
It was about 14 months.
So 14 months from the first interaction, and then once you had that relationship, how long was it till he asked for the cell phone total?
About a month.
So 14 months for when you realized it was a relationship, and then a month later he asked for the cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So anything within the first 14 months that he believed that he could definitely get a cell phone from you, because that's a risky question for him to do too. That's a risky request on his end too, because
no, he didn't mention anything like that in those first 14 months. And so from the time when our relationship changed, it went from our relationship changing to helping him escape in like 2.5 months. I mean, it accelerated pretty quick.
Was there anything in the course of the first 14 months where you felt he was testing you, like maybe letting him slide off little rule violations, or did you ever defend him at any point when there was a concern?
No, I don't think so. I didn't feel like he was testing me. And I felt like, he worked really hard to make the dog program successful.
You think that could have been part of the game too, a little bit?
I don't know. I kind of felt like the John Maynard that I got to know was the John Maynard that could have been if he hadn't gone to prison. That it was,
Wait.
the real person inside there.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that your want to help individuals could blind you to where the inmate could take advantage of that? Was it 100%?
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
So so as a volunteer, if you go in 100% wanting to help, and you think that your help is directly related to the inmate as opposed to working for the agency, so let's say the agency, let's say the inmate's able to shift it from you don't directly work for the agency, you directly work for me. Is that a way that an inmate can kind of manipulate into where
No, I don't think I would have bought that. But I think, I think it would have been easy for me to cross the line, like if in an instance maybe where a dog handler's parent died or their child died, and I might, spend a little more time talking to them and trying to, get them through whatever they were going through. I think I might have done something like that. But
Connie, you had a question, Connie?
No, it was just a thought. It was just kind of like, so there was like this 14 months of like grooming essentially. And then because I feel like, why would it accelerate so quickly? Right. So it's like the grooming process. And then there's confidence that we're solid, right? Like this, our relationship is now solid. She is emotionally invested in me and getting me out of here, right? Like, because I think when you talked about him asking, like, so if I wasn't in here, would there be a future for us? That question.
Right.
I'm just thinking like, so here it is. He's established a relationship with you. He's gotten close enough to you that you're not really questioning anymore whether you should or shouldn't be doing something. And then it's the cell phone that kind of makes you pause because like, wow, you could now get in trouble. Like everything else technically has been innocent in your mind because you haven't physically brought something into him. Although the emotional connection is there. Was there ever any physical interaction between the two of you guys that would make him think that he should accelerate this getting out, right? Like, were you hugging? Were you just anything?
Not up until just about a couple of weeks before the escape, and then, we might brush hands or something. So, and I there's been some good questions come through, and I can't remember them all. I was reading them, but
well, I got a few if you don't mind. I could send them because I do have some other questions, but I would love to get the audience here real quick. So, guys, we're gonna probably jump back and forth with the questions if that's okay, because we are creating a timeline, but I do want to get to the questions that are asked in the audience. So we're gonna jump ahead too, but then we're probably gonna go back to the timeline because we still have to get to the escape. But I wanted to ask something before I get to the questions here. Was it just the cell phone and then the escape? Were those the two main things that he asked for? So nothing else outside of that, right? Just those two things. Did he have leverage on you? What happens if you would have said no to the cell phone?
I think I would have just said no to the cell phone, and I would just gone on as the dog lady.
So there was nothing that he had on you that could have been exploited if you said no?
No.
Oh, that's a good. All right, so here's some of the questions.
But technically he did, right? Because he had inside information about her dad, about her husband. Like, so he did have some information that from the outside looking in could have been used as leverage, not necessarily with you, Toby, or other inmates, but with administration. So here it is. He's been able to get close to this woman. I mean, it's not like you were volunteering, right? You weren't being paid in that
I was
role.
volunteering, right?
Right.
And then let me ask, so some of the questions here is now we may go ahead a little bit in respect to giving the questions, but then we could always go back to the timeline and try to create an order. But I agree with Miss Toby. I think there's some questions that we do want to get to show respect to the audience that's here. And by the way, a lot of people are saying thank you, Toby, for sharing the story.
Okay.
So again, We appreciate it as well. One person, so this comes from Donica Lindsay. Do you consider yourself to have had low self-esteem or see yourself as if he was the best you could get?
No, I don't think so. I fell in love with John, and I don't know why exactly, but I felt like we had a connection. I don't think I had low self-esteem, but I think that I'd been married for 28 years, and I was, and I've said often, if I had been at a gas station pumping gas and some guy pulled up to pump gas next to me and he flirted with me, I wouldn't have given him the time of day. I would have just got into my car and driven away. But I think there was something about John being inside prison that made it feel different to me, because I thought, I have all the power here. I can just walk out whenever I want, and he can't get a hold of me. He can't, bother me. I have all the power here. And I don't think that was the case, because I don't think I had very much power. I think I was so emotionally involved that I couldn't say no. And I think the fact of him being in prison at the beginning made it seem like a little flirtation couldn't go anywhere because he was in prison. When I would have never flirted with somebody, out in public. I just wouldn't have done it because that's not who I am.
Right. And Connie, real quick, someone was asking, they love what you were talking about, the charming inmates. From your experience, and I would like also Toby, if you can comment after Connie, can you highlight how charming inmates are, and why, Connie, while you run the show just for a second, I hear my two kids screaming in the background, so I'm going to just remove myself for a second while you got.
All right. So inmates always have a way of connecting. And, if they find that they could establish something in common with you, it's been my experience that they're not going to be very aggressive, right? They're not going to be in any way threatening, right? If anything, they will be very submissive, and they're kind of going to fall back to allow you to kind of take their cues from you. So like if they say something nice or they say something suggestive, if you kind of smile or laugh, or even if you don't respond, sometimes just not saying anything, it's sort of sending them a message that that everything is okay. Like almost like you're receiving that. But if you actually say something to them in response, then it almost gives it life. You know what I mean? So I would wonder, like, so when you were having like these engaging conversations with John, was it, did it feel like you were just speaking to like an old friend, or,
They did. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that feeling that like I'm having a common conversation with an old friend, but also, so at what point does it get flirty, or does it ever get flirty?
It did get flirty about, like 5 weeks before the escape.
Let me see. Sorry, guys, just catching up on the comments. So let me ask the question. Someone did ask. So again, guys, we may move a little forward, but we are going to go back. Do you still talk to John?
I do. I email him on occasion, yes. And my husband and I have been to visit him in prison about maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. So how did that come into play? So, I mean, again, I would really like to wait to answer that later, because I want to definitely talk about the relationship after you were arrested and the great stuff you're doing now with the female inmates. I do want to get to that because I believe you developed a couple of programs for the female inmates. I want to talk about your time in prison, because I want to see how it was for you to see things from the other side. So there's a lot of things to cover here, but I still think there's a couple more things that we can cover in this relation with the developing of the relationship. Let me ask you a question. One of the things I want to go back on is that, so 14 months, you had those interactions, wasn't a strong relationship, but then all of a sudden things started to move pretty quickly at that point, correct? Within the last, what was it, 2 months?
Yes.
Within the last 2 months. So what were the differences? What were the changes from the first 14 months to the last 2 months? Because that's rapid. What was let me ask you a question. What was the open window where both you guys knew that you were in a relationship? Was that ever declared by you and him?
Yes, it was. At one time he told me that he thought he'd fallen in love with me. And, at that time I felt that I was in love with him too.
So by the way, when you heard him say that, did he say it first?
He said it first. Uh-huh.
Do you think you felt it first, or you think he felt it first?
I think it was kind of I think we were both feeling it at the same time.
And obviously to this day, do you still think there's feelings unless I'm not going to say about you and him, but what about him towards you out of respect for your husband?
I don't think so. I mean, I think today we both think of each other as a friend, and we feel like we've been through a lot together. And there's some things that we've been through that nobody else has been through. And so I do feel that there's a friendship. It's not like he's my best friend or anything, but I do feel that he's a friend, and my husband feels like he's a friend to him too as well.
All right, guys. So I would like to see if we could move forward to the bringing in of the contraband, but if possible, if you guys have any questions about the developing of the relationship, let us know, because we could go into that. But I want to try to see if we could start moving forward to the bringing in the cell phone, and obviously eventually getting to the escape. I do have a question. When you look back at the situation, how do you think do you think he set you up? That's a good question by Alicia.
I don't think he did. Still to this day, I still think that he loved me at the time. And I think it was genuine. Somebody asked, was I searched when I came in? And the answer is yes, kind of. So I walked through the metal detector when I came in, and I always had a dog with me or dog stuff. And I'd set it on the counter, or I'd hand the officer the leash, and I'd walk through the metal detector, and then I'd take the dog on the other side. So, but I was never searched, like patted down or anything like that.
Now, I want people to know some facilities at this time, I don't know if it was in Kansas, they still allowed staff to have cell phones. I don't know if that's the case for you guys at that point, but
I don't think that the staff had cell phones. I don't think they could bring them in to the.
Yeah, some facilities actually. I remember when I was earlier in my career, staff could have cell phones, and eventually, obviously, we did away with that because of the potential threat. Did you feel? Now we get to the contraband. Did you feel nervous the day you had the cell phone, or did you?
Yeah, I did. I felt really nervous, and I just put it in. I had a little dog I was bringing in that day, and he had surgery, so I brought him in a dog crate, and I just threw the cell phone in the dog crate.
Oh, that's right. Well, we're gonna get into the dog crate later on, because I know that plays into something a little bit bigger. Yeah. How were you able to give him the cell phone? How did that work out?
I gave him the dog in the crate. I just said, "Here's your dog."
And he already knew the cell phone would be in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now, was it a burner phone, or was there any way that this phone could be traced back to you if it was discovered?
Yeah, it was a burner phone.
It was a burner phone. And then when you gave him the phone, were you ever concerned if that phone would ever be discovered? Did you ever was a little worried that if they do a search or something that they could find the phone, or did he have a special spot he'd hide it? Would he hide it in the work area where you guys were at, or did he bring it back to his unit?
He brought it back to his unit. And I don't know where he hid it, but he brought it back to his unit.
And he could, because of his sentence, was he an inmate? He wasn't housed in a dorm, right? He was housed probably in his own cell.
He had a roommate. There was 2 in his room.
So let me ask you. So that's another question. So when dealing with this and being involved with that inmate, were you ever concerned that he was telling other inmates what was happening, and that maybe exposing the potential for a relationship between you two?
I never did have that fear, because John was pretty smart about, things that went on in the prison. I don't think that I didn't worry about. I felt like he was going to handle it.
And so you trusted him.
I did.
And did you think as I said, even with the bringing of the cell phone, even with the cellmate, he was talking to probably you on the phone with the cellmate there?
I don't know. I think it could have happened, yes, but he never told me what happened in the prison, so that if somebody asked me, I couldn't give any answers because I didn't know anything.
And how was the phone paid for? Did you pay for that monthly?
I think I put so many minutes on it, and we only had it for like 3 weeks, and then we had the escape. So I never had to pay for more than when I first put on it.
Now, when he called you for the first time, did he call your home?
No, he called my cell phone. I didn't even have a home phone.
Oh, and then did he ever call you when you were home with your family?
He didn't call me unless I was home. He didn't call me at home unless I was by myself.
Oh, and how would he know that?
Well, my husband was a fireman and he knew what his schedule was. So if he wasn't home that day, then he would feel like he could call, but otherwise he didn't.
Do you think when it came like the dialogues that you had on the phone, is that what kind of helped plan this escape? Was it done through the phone? Right.
Yes, it did. Definitely.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, we do got more questions coming in. You know what? Hey, Connie, let me hit some questions from the audience, but you have any questions in the meantime for her, Connie, while I find some questions first? Because I got more. We're going to get to the escape.
I think the only question I had in the moment was whether or not he called you, like if you had to step out if he called you when your husband was home, but you said that your husband was usually at work, which also meant that you guys spoke enough that he understood some of the intricate details of your life outside.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Did you ever feel like uncomfortable that he knew so much detail about your life, like your husband's work schedule?
Well, I mean, it was easy enough. He worked 24 hours. He was off 48. And it was easy enough to know what that was. So, no, I never did. I never thought anything of it. And, I'm trying to remember. I think that all the dog handlers knew that my husband was a fireman and that, and on a day he worked, I would be at the prison longer. So I think it wasn't that hard to figure out.
Were you ever, I think we discussed this at the beginning, but were you ever given any warning about giving out personal information to inmates? Was that ever something that was ever discussed with you?
I went to the volunteer class and I think it lasted like 2 or 3 hours. And I went when I first signed up for the prison dog program. And it was a long time ago from when any of this happened. And I had dismissed things probably. They may have said it, but I never thought of it or didn't remember it. I kind of think that, if you're a volunteer, you should have like refresher training every 3 or 4 months because stuff changes and you don't remember it all.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, one of the concerns I would have is, so in corrections, obviously, we try to teach people universal precaution. That doesn't mean that they stop. You're going to have interactions, especially more now than ever. The system has changed. You are going to interact with inmates. And obviously, when you interact with inmates, you got to have those boundaries. And some of the first things they tell us is protect your personal information, obviously, at all costs, because personal information could be leverage. So when all the inmates are kind of knowing that your husband's this, and I mean, was that ever something that was bothersome to you?
No, it wasn't.
Knowing what some of the inmates could have done, like having someone, let's say, that was in for murder, regardless, knowing that this is, your husband is a fireman. Like, what other personal, out of curiosity, what other personal things did the inmates know about you outside of John? Like, did the other inmates in the program know things that were a little bit too personal?
I think that most of the dog handlers knew that I had 2 sons, and they knew that I worked at the vet clinic and that I used to work at Sprint. So I think that there was a lot of things that maybe they did know.
They said, can you ask her one question about the safety and security being at risk? Okay, we're going to get to that, John. We'll get to that. That's about the safety and security. And again, everybody's thanking you for being so honest. Someone asked, Toby, what made you tell the inmates so much about your life? And that comes from Trucker Steve.
I didn't even feel like I was telling them so much about my life. My whole life, I've told people all kinds of stuff. And I felt like I wasn't telling them as much as I told most of the people in my life. So to me, it didn't feel like I was telling him too much.
Connie, what's your thoughts as a civilian trainer? I mean, is that our fault at that point?
I think so. I mean, I think Alicia B actually just put it in there. 2 to 3 hours of training just doesn't sound like it's appropriate, right? Like, and even hearing from Toby, the thought of needing a refresher, right? Because you really don't have any context to that training when you first come in as a volunteer. Even if it's all viable, it's all good information. Like, what is the context to any of those details that are being shared in the moment? I think certainly, yes, you need to be going through the safety, security, operational, that type of stuff, which I think is really important. But I also feel that ultimately it's not until you start actually working in the facility and around the inmates that some of this stuff that we kind of get in training really starts to come to life. So certainly I feel like we have to take responsibility to the extent of the training aspect. We can't check the box on that one, right? We can't say we met this requirement, our own requirement of ensuring that this person had all the tools they needed in order to be safe and in order to not fall into this web of manipulation, right? But I guess there's that other side that says, the other side of me that says, like, so there's certain things we just know are wrong, right? Like relationship with an inmate is wrong. Self bringing in a cell phone is wrong. I mean, certainly the escape is the escape, and we know that's wrong. But I think there's certain things that, as we work in this environment that kind of pull on us internally if we start to say or do things that we know feel wrong in the space, even the emotional development over the period of time. I think that was there a point where it felt wrong?
It felt exciting and it felt scary because I didn't want anybody to know. So trying to keep it secret was scary. So, I think one of the big differences when normal volunteers, when they come in for an hour and they're maybe in a classroom and there's usually an officer or some staff member in that classroom. And the classrooms, at least in the prison I was in, the classrooms are in an area that's not out in the living space where the inmates are. I didn't fit that mold. I was in the dorm rooms where the inmates lived or their cell blocks checking on their dogs. And I was out in the prison yard doing dog training when the yard was open. So I was not a normal volunteer. And the training that you would give to one of those volunteers who comes in once a week and does some kind of a class in a supervised room that's not in the main part of the prison, that's so totally different from what I actually was doing. That
it sounds like it's even more important that you had training because you were.
I think I needed way more than just the volunteer training. Somebody just asked that question. I think I needed more similar to what they train the officers.
What's unique about this too is because we do have more interactions. It's a good chance for an inmate to build that connection. And when an inmate gets you to shift your loyalties, being wrong is subjective. It depends on where you're loyal to. Like if I'm wrong, maybe if I'm still loyal to the agency at that point. Did you ever feel that your loyalties were shifting more towards the inmate and breaking away from your prescribed role and responsibilities, knowing that you now gave this inmate a phone, which was the first thing, and then eventually aiding the inmate in an escape?
Well, the phone really was the game changer. When I brought in the phone, things changed.
All right,
I knew I was wrong, but I kept doing it.
This is a good question, and Toby, by the way, you're just amazing. I want you to finish. I just want to let you know the people in this chat here, they're very respectful of the story you're sharing. A lot of them are saying thank you for everything you're doing.
Yes.
But can you finish your thought again?
So I'm just reading, that this person says they feel like they want to protect you. Why didn't any officer not pick up on the signs? I don't know. I don't know why they didn't pick up on it. I don't know.
And what's great about this, guys, is she's taking responsibility since day one. So when someone takes full responsibility of what they've done, I still want to look at the environment to see what permits it. because I do believe that, again, we have someone here that stepped up and take full responsibility. Okay, I get it. But could we have done more? Did we do anything to protect, this from happening? Because, again, you don't want to have an environment that allows for this to happen. And feel like, when I think for me on the administrative level, when you have someone that gets caught up, first off, it's always sad when that happens. These are employees that are put in a trusting position, but then we always go back and ask. First thing we ask is about their interactions. How did nobody catch it? So we go right back to the environment where we feel could have made this permissible. And I believe that in this case here, do you feel that the environment now looking back was very lax and that's what allowed it? Like, did you ever feel concerned, even when the relationship was growing, that you would be called out on it?
I did worry about that. This odd situation existed, I think. And, I think that the prison staff looked at me like Mother Teresa or something. They couldn't see me doing anything wrong. So they didn't see me doing anything wrong because, I'd been there for so long. I'd spent so much time in the prison that I kind of became a fixture there.
And you know what's unique, guys? So I see what Chuck Williams is saying. Let me ask something on this, Toby. So Chuck says she's taking responsibility, but she still has a relationship with the inmate and a relationship to a level that her husband is okay with. Can I explain something first? You're no longer connected to the agency, so I don't expect you to have a relationship with the agency anymore. So I get that.
Right.
I mean, I'm assuming obviously you're no longer connected with them. So at that point here, we can't expect you to have that relationship. Did anything about what you did? Obviously, that you committed some level of wrongdoing, right? But now you're still communicate with the inmate who got you involved in that. Is there any animosity towards him for doing that, or do you see him as maybe a victim too in this all?
Well, here's how I look at it. So I felt like early on after I was arrested, I felt like I could be a victim. And I felt like if I let myself be a victim, if I called myself a victim, then I would be a victim for the rest of my life. So my other choice was to be a victor and to, step up and say, I am responsible for my decisions. And these are the things I did and they were wrong. And I'm going to change I'm going to use this as a stepping stone to do something better with my life. And so I have never let myself call myself a victim because I feel like it does me a disservice. It takes all the responsibility away from me. And I am totally responsible for my decisions. So I have not let myself feel like a victim. And so I don't feel any animosity towards John. And my husband and I, so about 2 years after we were married, I got married about a year after I got out of prison. And about 2 years after we were married, I had a reporter call me and he said that he'd been talking to John Maynard. And I didn't know where John was at the time. I had had no contact with him. And he said, John wanted to know if this reporter would give him my phone number. And he said, I wanted to call you and see if it was okay. And my husband was on, I had him on speakerphone and my husband said, Toby, I think you need to talk to John. You guys need to have some closure. And I'm not threatened by John. So yeah, I'll tell him to call because I want to talk to him too. And so we gave him the phone number and John called and we talked on the phone for a while. And John had been traded to New Hampshire. And my husband is from Maine. He grew up in Maine. And we just mentioned to John on the phone that we were driving back to Maine to go visit, Chris's town that he grew up in and all of his friends back there. And John said, well, Toby, New Hampshire's right next to Maine. You guys should fill out visiting forms because I'd really like to meet Chris and it'd be good to see you again. And I said, John, no prison in the world is going to let me come visit you. I helped you escape from prison. He said, well, fill out the forms. You never know. And they came back in the mail approved. And I thought, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. But But we stopped and visited him, and we were there for 2 hours. And he said, if I'd known you were coming, I could have gotten an all-day visit because you came from so far away. And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't. I think 2 hours is good. So anyway, it was a good visit, and it was good for me. I think it really felt like closure, and it was good for Chris to meet John, and it was good for John to meet Chris. And Chris told him, you don't have to worry about Toby anymore. I'm taking care of her, and she's doing just fine. And I'm glad you're a friend, but I've got her. And it was a really good experience. And since then, I emailed John. I don't talk to him on the phone, but I do email him. And now he's in a prison in Arizona, and the staff there knows who I am, and they know, and they read our emails, and they know that, who I am. And actually, I did write a book. It's going to be released June 15th.
I have the link to the pre-order in my description here, guys, on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, I did
write a book. Yeah.
Yep. If you're guys
Living
on
with
YouTube.
Conviction. So my book is called Living with Conviction.
Let me put that in there. Hold on, guys. The link to that book is in the description, but it's called Living with Conviction. I found it very easier by going through Amazon as well and just putting in Toby Dorr Living with Conviction. I wanted to ask you something, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Wait, first off, the book comes out June
15th. And there'll be a hardback, a paperback, an audio book, which I'm reading myself, and the ebook. And right now the ebook's available for pre-order, but the other 3 will be out there for pre-order in the next week.
I wanted to ask you something that was very unique, and then maybe Connie would like to comment. You said closure. Now, being that, and we'll get to the escape now. I'd like to get to that, but I just want to fast forward a little bit. I know you guys go through the high-speed chase, and then you guys wind up getting caught. And when you said closure, do you feel somewhat responsible that he's back in prison and you're at home?
I did feel really bad about that for a long time because he got 20 years added to his sentence. And I felt so bad about it because I felt like, he was worse off than before I met him. And I told John that, when we talked again, and he said, I'm responsible for my own actions. I knew I was going to get more time. That's not on you. That's on me. So
I guess the question would be the whole breakout. Was it his idea or yours? I'm assuming it was his, right?
It was his idea. Yes.
Yeah. So why would you feel responsible then? Right.
Because if he hadn't met me, then he wouldn't have broke out of prison and he wouldn't have got the 20 extra years.
Wow. What a unique perspective, because, again, Connie, this is your discussion here.
No, go ahead. You're right. Go ahead. That's what I'm like sitting here like, oh my goodness. Like
I would think
I know you're taking ownership, but like I can't imagine that you would feel in any way responsible if he is the one who initiated the breakout and this whole process.
I would think that, right, Connie, that was great, man, because I would think actually he would feel guilty because you've been locked up. You had to go to prison for 21 or 27 months.
27 months. Yeah.
Was there? So I mean, it's amazing how what it really does define who you are as a person, though, technically, because it makes sense in context of who you are, that you would find that you would find that little bit of a twist where you would take responsibility, and maybe the closure would be, I got to meet him and just make sure he's okay with us. Oh, wait, hold on, guys. We got someone else coming onto the stream, Duty Ron. So this is Duty Ron comes in on the best part, because this is where we're going to talk about the escape. So we do have a police perspective here. But first off, guys, for my audience that's not here, that doesn't know, I'm sorry, my audience that is here that doesn't know, Duty Ron, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience real quick?
Sure, Anthony. My name is Ron Liccardi, Duty Ron, retired New York City police detective. I spent 20 years in the Fugitive Enforcement Division of the New York City Police Department. And it's an honor to be here with you and Connie tonight and your special guest, Toby. I just want to say, thank you for sharing your story. I saw your piece on News Nation that you did yesterday, and just unbelievable, strength that you're showing here. And it's great for this story because Vicky White, I feel, is in a very similar situation with
I
that
think
you
so
went
too.
through.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Toby, your story is going to resonate with the millions of people who are watching what's going on and what's
Mhm.
unfolding right now, and you're helping to give a bird's eye view, your perspective of what you went through
Mhm.
back in your time. So
Mhm.
I think it's wonderful that you've come forward and done that. And again, thank you, Anthony, for having her on, and
Mhm.
it would be an honor to one day have you on my channel as well to talk about this.
Thank you. I'd like
I
to do
already
that.
booked her for
Yeah.
you.
Awesome.
Duty Ron, Duty Ron, she has a book coming out June 15th. So I thought around the release of the book, maybe you could talk about her book. And she said, right off
Absolutely.
bat, so
Mhm.
this is going to be the tough part here. But again, I believe there's a lot to learn from this. One last question from the audience here did ask, were you allowed to have contact visits with John?
Contact visits. You mean when the one time I went to visit him?
Yes.
Yeah, it was in a regular visiting room. Yeah.
So that would be a contact visit.
Yeah. It wasn't behind glass. Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't. It
It
wasn't.
was not behind glass. Right.
Right. So okay. So real quick, and I'll have Connie take the lead because I got to get the kids to sleep. I'm only gonna take 1 minute, but Daddy's got to do a run by kiss. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But before we do that, I want to get to the escape part, and I'll have Connie maybe or Duty Ron just kind of lead this part. But I want to ask the question first: is that so? How did this even begin? What was this dialogue for the escape over the phone, or was this something that was said in person?
It was over the phone. And, it started out, like John said, well, I think I need to get out of here, so we can be together. And I was like, oh, you can't get out of there. How's that going to happen? And he said, well, I could put myself in a box and mail myself out. And I said, well, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard, and then he'd come up with another idea and say, well, that's stupid too. That's not going to work. And then one day he said, well, I could hide in a dog crate inside your van when you come to do a dog adoption. And I said, well, that would probably work, and then he was off and running, figuring out how it was going to work. And I thought we were just having a conversation. I didn't even really realize that we were planning something. I just was like, having a conversation and telling him the dumb ideas he had and how they weren't going to work. So,
Hey, Toby, I have a question for you, and I don't know
mhm,
because I didn't listen to the whole conversation here.
mhm.
But in my reading and some of the things that I looked at quickly once Anthony told me he was going to have you on, didn't John at one point in your relation, well, not relationship, but in your time with him in the
Mhm.
program, didn't he once protect you from a threat against
Yes.
you from
Yes, he
another
did.
inmate?
He did.
Okay,
So,
I didn't know if you
um,
guys spoke about that.
we did not actually. So, at one time I had this program that the inmates could adopt the dogs that they were training. If they could send them out to a family member, then I would let them adopt their dog for $50. So it didn't even cover the cost of their spay and neuter. But, and one of these inmates wanted to adopt his dog. And I told him he could. And his girlfriend was going to come up to pick the dog up at a visiting day. And it was like 6 weeks later, and she still hadn't come to pick up the dog. And so I was walking through the yard with two of my other dog handlers. And I came upon this particular inmate and I said, when are you going to get your dog out of here? Because it's been 6 weeks since you said you wanted to adopt him. And I need the space for another dog. And he got mad and he started yelling at me and he put his fists up and he was right in my face. And I just knew he was going to hit me. And I looked all around the yard. I mean, I was afraid. I knew he was big. And I looked all around the yard and there weren't even any officers out there. So I just felt I was going to,
Vulnerable, scared.
yeah. And then I see John, walking, meandering up, just his slow little pace, walking up as if it was just any other day. And he kind of diffused the situation and he told the inmate, to go back to his room. And then he walked me to the gate and said, I'm going to walk Toby out. So I did. And he did.
Was
And
that a turning point for you,
that was a
or
turning
were you?
point. Yeah, it was a turning point. I saw John in a different light then. And I felt like I was safe when I was with him, from that point on.
One of the things, that's a great question, Ron, because one of the things we cover in the book is the offer for protection. And basically, it's also a test to see how connected you are with support staff. Because again, if an inmate comes up and says, hey, I'm here to protect you or offer that protection, the first thing most of us should do is, I don't need that, obviously, because at that point, I got my peers. But the other big concern about that is when someone offers you protection, they're putting you in a subordinate role. You just want to know that they're the ones that have more control. So that offer of protection usually has to nip, because when you say yes to that, that allows the inmate to put themselves at a higher level.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that I think is important to note here too is that, it was already established that you guys were sort of in this relationship, and it seemed like John had a way of always making you feel seen. In the beginning, you said that you weren't seen. So here it is. He's protecting you. Here it is. He's connecting with you. He's engaging with you. He's giving you comfort in situations where your husband wasn't present. He's talking to you at night when you're alone because your husband's working double shifts or the 24-hour shift, right? Like, it just seems like he embedded himself in your life, in your world, even though he was not out and free. And so, as that happens, I just can imagine your connection to him. And he probably could have asked you for anything. I mean, and which is why he went from the cell phone straight to helping me get out. Right. Because we are so connected. I could ask her for anything.
Hey, Connie, that's a good point. And we will get this escape. There's going to be as long as everybody's okay with this, because there's so much here, that's a good point. So manipulation is very slow and subtle, right? And what happens here is they first try to do things that are consistent, small steps forward, because they don't want to shock you with that ultimate request right away, because again, they're grooming, right? Do you think most of that grooming occurred on the cell phone? Again, because the inmate did, from our eyes, go from the cell phone and jump to the escape, but there's so much in the middle that would usually have to be there to get you to be willing to do that, because going from a cell phone, bringing something in and taking something out is a big jump.
Definitely the cell phone contributed to our relationship growing. Yeah, it definitely did.
So when he asked you for the escape, I guess we can go to that. When he asked you to, help him escape, was that an automatic yes from you, or did you have to think about it, or?
It was not an automatic yes, but I don't know that I thought about it for too long. So, it was kind of innocent at first. He said, if I wasn't in prison, would you be with me? And I said, I might be. And then, then he started thinking about ways to get out of prison. So it kind of progressed without me just jumping right in.
So did you think at that point, that his motives may be more? So here's what it is. So for me, when I look at manipulation, I know there's a process that leads towards an outcome, so for me, it's really about the outcome. I know a lot of people, the people that don't think it could happen, like, oh, this will never happen to me, is because they're very outcome driven. I'll never bring in this, but they totally ignore the process that it takes to get to that point. Which would be, the dialogue that occurred, the trust, and again, 12, 14 months before the intentional escape. Do you think somewhere along the line, before he asked for the escape, did you think that there were other things that he was maybe going to ask for or use you for, or just to take that jump?
I didn't feel like there was anything else he was going to ask me for. And, honestly, I really think the fact that my dad was dying of cancer was huge in my decision to just run away. I had so many things I was running away from too. And I think if my dad hadn't had cancer, this would have never happened.
So would that be because maybe like with the fear, like there's not really a fear of consequences at this point, because at this point you're questioning the value of your own life. So even if I got arrested, who cares? Was there ever a point when he asked you for something, when you made the decision, you really didn't care about the consequences of getting caught anyway?
I think that could be true. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think part of that is how you value your life. You also see the consequences in connection to that. So like you just said, You're losing your father. God rest his soul. At this
Yeah.
point, I don't have enough value in my life, so why do I care about the consequences?
And at the time that all this was happening too, I mean, I was having thoughts of like swerving my car in front of a semi truck. I was like in a
Wow.
bad place.
So it was like a perfect storm. Is what
yeah,
you're
it
saying,
really
Toby.
was.
Yeah,
It really
you know,
was a perfect
all of
storm.
everything seemed like it just aligned up
Yeah,
where
it was like,
he could have success.
dozens and dozens of things that culminated in this. And if any one of them wouldn't have happened, it wouldn't have happened. It was just, it was a perfect storm.
And it didn't seem like you were the aggressor here. It seemed like you were kind of actually being pursued by him, essentially slowly but surely. No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's, hey, Toby, you know what's a good question? Was the story of the crime that John committed only told to you by him, or did you ever research him?
I researched it.
Was he the only inmate you ever researched? And what would motivate you to research them? Did you?
So I researched him when I started having feelings for him because I wanted to see, really what was going on.
Wow, because that's why. I mean, that was a great question. Who asked that question? That was a spot on question because that to me is usually a first sign of maybe I'm overly involved. Why am I only researching this individual? Okay, so this is where it comes to the police part. But before we close, when we get to the escape, Connie, you have anything you'd like to ask before we move to the escape now? You're muted. Ha!
I said no. I'm excited for us to get to the escape. I think a lot of this, all the buildup, has been really good because it kind of gives us the backdrop for everything you were going through prior to making this decision that you were going to help him escape. But I would be interested from just a security perspective to understand how he would even get out in the crate and him. I mean, did no one check? It's a lot of questions. So I'm interested in hearing.
So here's what we'll do, since Toby's been so wonderful here. I would love if we could do a little shift here. I'm going to ask Duty Ron, because Duty Ron was a police officer. But by the way, I want you to know something, Toby. If you're not familiar with Duty Ron's channel, he does a lot for women as well, women that are in abusive relationships. So it kind of relates to what you have with the female prison. Yeah. So maybe that's something you guys can connect with later on. But I'm going to have Duty Ron gently bring up the questions about her escape. Now, mind you, Duty Ron, if you're not familiar, she did manage her escape by putting the inmate into a dog crate. And then, you know what? Before we start, you can show us that. You want to show us that real quick, Toby, and tell us what that is?
Workbooks. These are the workbooks that I created: Butterflies Unleashed, Bee Unleashed, and Dragonflies Unleashed. And this is a series for women. And really, I wrote Butterflies Unleashed for women who are in prison or on parole or in a halfway house. And it's a journey of transformation. So it talks about, building character, like discernment and boundaries and faith and, just becoming a stronger person so that you don't depend on other people to, make decisions for you. And then Be Unleashed is a program about fitting into a healthy community and what it takes to be a giving member of a healthy community and also a receiving member of a healthy community. Because most of the women that I met in prison were there because of the communities they lived in. And so this program is more about how to find a healthy community. And then this Dragonflies Unleashed workbook is for women who feel called to do something, but they don't quite know how to put their finger on what it is they want to do. So that's the series that I put together.
Outstanding.
Yeah. I have a quick question in that context. Is there a religious component that was in play as it related to your relationship with John? Like, did you feel like there was like some sort of calling for you, or like you were like a savior for him because you didn't quite identify him as being a murderer, but more or less a victim of his circumstance?
No, not exactly. I don't think I felt that way.
Okay.
Hey, is there a link for the books? Those books? Someone's asking.
These books are available right now on my website, but they will be on Amazon too, hopefully in June as well.
And I do have her website linked in the description on YouTube. So if you guys go to YouTube, there will be a description of both her website and the book that's coming out on the market June 15th. All right,
Yeah.
Duty Ron, let's
These
get this.
workbooks are all 12-week programs, by the way.
Now, wait, is it? Let me ask you a question. Do you know how many facilities these programs are in right now?
So I had a lot of leads, and then COVID came and they weren't letting anybody go in the prison, any volunteers. So none of the prisons that I contacted wanted to take on, ministering these, but there were some volunteer groups that were already in the prisons that were going to take these books in and you make them a part of their program. And then all the volunteer stuff got canceled. So right now I have them in some halfway houses, but not in any prisons. So
Hey, halfway houses are perfect time. That's where the transition is.
Right.
All right, Duty Ron, this is the part. This is the escape.
Well, yeah, Toby. So the audience that we have here are all, they're all interested in how this was orchestrated, how it happened, and if you can give in your best, in your best knowledge and view of it. I know it was a while ago, but just
I know every bit of it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So give everybody, everybody wants to know, like, how did this get orchestrated? Was it a 50-50? Was it all you? Was it a part of him? And let the folks know what led up to this and how it happened.
Once John decided he was going to, that the best way to do this was to get into a dog crate in my van, then he started figuring out ways he could fit into a dog crate. So this was the biggest dog crate you could get. It's a wire dog crate, which for, so many things, it's just this perfect storm. So here we're thinking that John's going to escape in my van when I come in to do a dog adoption, but we didn't know how. And then the unit team leader said, Toby, you have this big wire dog crate in here that you brought in when we had that dog in here that had puppies. But I don't want to have a wire dog crate in the prison because, inmates could cut it up and make shanks out of it. I need you to get it out of here. And John was standing there when he said that. And he said, you know what? That crate is so big and it's so hard for Toby to carry. How about if I bring it down when she does a dog adoption, she's picking up dogs, and I just bring it down and put it in her van for her so she doesn't have to carry it out of the prison. And the unit team said, well, that's a great idea. And so he made a note to the officers at the gate that, that I would be picking up a crate on that next adoption day. And so, it's a wire dog crate and you can see what's in it. So John put a pack out box inside the dog crate and he pretzeled himself up into this pack out box. And I still don't know how he fit in there, but he put a leg over his head and another leg behind his back. And he just had to, be contorted to get into that box. And inside the prison, I had a farm wagon, those wagons that have 4 really sturdy wheels and they've got a mesh grate that you can put a bale of hay on or something and pull it around. I had a farm wagon that I kept inside the prison so I could move 50-pound sacks of dog food around to the different units where the dogs were. And so they put that crate on the dog wagon and John's in a box in the crate on the wagon. And then he told his roommate and the guys in the cell next to him that he had got called to work. And I was expecting to pick up this dog crate. So if he had it loaded on the wagon, could they just pull the wagon down and put the crate in the van for me? And so they did.
And nobody checked the wagon, obviously.
No. Mm-mm.
Because of maybe that trust of how many times you've moved items in and out. And I guess everybody got complacent. So this comes on to staff at the facility that all trusted you. When you guys communicated about this master plan, was it in person or was it through that phone that you got?
It was through the phone.
So they could have looked at the electronics from the phone, even though it was a burner phone, if they recovered that phone. But you guys probably took that phone with you and discarded it and got rid of it.
Yeah.
And we're also interested in hearing about the 12 days that you guys were in hiding, because that's another great part. obviously not a great part of this, but
Right,
it's a
right.
really
Of the
interesting
story.
part of this.
So one of the really interesting things about that particular day when we decided to do this, we'd pick the day, ahead. And it turns out on that day, it was 19 degrees with a really strong wind, and it was freezing cold, and it was spitting snow. So nobody wanted to be outside. So nobody was hanging around watching what we did.
Right.
So, I had, so the way it worked, there's 3 gates at the prison. So you drive through gate 1 and there's a huge parking lot where semi trucks turn around because they have industry inside the prison and they ship stuff out. Then there's gate 2 and gate 3 were together, and all you could do was fit a vehicle between gate 2 and gate 3. And there's a guard shack right there. So I would park between gate 2 and gate 3, and they would close gate 2, and then they'd open gate 3, which goes straight into the prison. And all the inmates were standing there with their dogs that I was going to take to adoption that day. And they'd bring their dogs to the van, and I'd open the van door and we'd put the dogs in crates. And then the inmates would go back behind the gate and they'd shut gate 3, and I'd get in the van and they'd open gate 2 and I'd drive out, and then they'd open gate 1 and I'd drive out. And that's what we did that day.
Wow.
Can I ask you a question? Going back to the escape. So you actually drove this vehicle in and out every day. So you knew the officers.
I drove it in and out every weekend for dog adoptions.
Oh,
When
yeah,
I was picking up 10 or 20 dogs to take to adoptions, I couldn't walk all those out.
So did you see any vulnerability in how the officers searched the crates or the dog crates?
They never did search the dog crates.
There it is.
Toby, I have
they-
a question.
They stood right there and watched me put dogs in them, and then the inmates left, and that was the way it was.
Toby, my question for you is, how high was your anxiety that day of the breakout of you getting out with John?
Oh, it was, I thought surely everybody would notice because I was a nervous wreck.
And nobody picked up on it. Obviously, you guys were able to pull it off and have that 12 days on the run. I mean, what was your mindset? What was the thinking? Like, were you thinking long term, like, oh, I'm going to have a long, fulfilling life with this prisoner? I'm just trying to get into your mindset.
I didn't really think too far into the future, but I always believed I would be back. I didn't think I was going to be gone forever.
You know what was a good question?
I didn't know what coming back would look like. I hadn't pictured that, and I didn't know how long it would be, but I pictured myself coming back at some point.
Hey, Toby, this is a great question. It's really a comment, but again, now this is from the correctional staff side. Now, again, obviously, we still have a job regardless of whether we're comfortable with the person or not. Our job 100% is to check everything every day. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel guilty for violating the trust of staff?
Oh, I feel terribly bad about it. Before I was released from prison, I wrote a letter to the warden and I apologized to him for breaking his trust, and I said, that trust was not given lightly. And you had a lot of faith in me, and I violated all that. And I'm so sorry that I did that. And I'm sorry that I brought, international eyes onto your prison and in a negative way. And he wrote me back immediately. And he said, I think I said something about, you must have felt betrayed by me or something like that. And he wrote me back and he said, Toby, I never felt betrayed by you. I felt afraid for you and I was concerned for you. And that's what drove me. And he said, don't let this escape be who you are because you still have so much to give the world.
And that's the person. Now, guys, I want to emphasize something here, guys. Obviously, we know the public is directly affected, so I'm not going to minimize this in my comment. Mm-hmm. But being in administration myself, there's a huge betrayal there when someone's put in a position of trust and they violate it because
from the warden down, everybody's held responsible at the
Mhm.
highest level. For
Mhm.
that warden to say that, that says a lot about him. But having
Mhm.
said that, how did that make you feel when because you expect him to be angry. You
Yes,
expect
I
him.
did.
So when he
Mhm.
turned that around and said he was more concerned about you, how did that make you feel about what you did?
Um, I didn't think so much, didn't change my feelings so much about what I did because I already felt bad about that. But what it did do is make me believe that if he saw something worthy in me, that I could find that thing in myself too, and I could do something that would make a difference.
And you wrote this letter when you were in the jail or prison?
Prison, a month before my release.
A month before your release. All right.
Mhm.
So we'll get to that. So I know Duty Ron was talking about the chase or where you were for 12 days, or can we get on that real quick? Or what do you got, Duty Ron? I know you may have had some questions for that.
Well, yeah. So I wanted her to kind of walk us through the day that she made the breakout with him, and then where they went, like where they went from there. Was it a planned event? Was it a
Mhm.
planned location to go to that
Mhm.
that bunker or whatever? It looked like
Yeah.
a house in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it was a
And
cabin in
right,
Tennessee
cabin.
in the mountains
Right,
at a lake.
right,
And we
right. So
had paid for a month there. So we knew we were going there.
okay, but it only lasted 12 days because you
Mhm.
guys, I guess somebody called in a tip or somebody saw you guys or
No,
something like
here's
that.
what happened. And this was I'm the stupidest criminal ever. So I'll just say that right up front. I bought a truck for us, a getaway truck, and I paid cash for it. And they needed an address to send the title to. And I gave them the address of the cabin we were staying at because we needed to license the truck. We couldn't be driving a truck with no tag on it.
Oh
So
my.
that's how they caught us. Yeah. I
It
used a
just
fake name, but that wasn't
right.
good enough. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Fascinating. Fascinating.
Uh-huh.
12 days on the run. What was it like? Was it nerve wracking for you? Was he calm about it? Was there arguments between the two of you? Was there any kind
Mhm.
of tension? I mean, these are these are questions
Right.
that everybody wants to know.
Right. So, I expected it to just be like a vacation, and with this person that I'd fallen in love with, and it would be romantic, and there were parts of it that were that way, but it is unbelievably stressful to be on the run and to be looking over your shoulder and thinking, who was that? Oh, there's a police car next to us. Don't look at him. Don't, it's unbelievably stressful. And it makes tensions run higher. And so, this whole time that John and I were developing this relationship when he was inside prison, I never saw excuse me, I got a cold here. I never saw John get mad about anything. He was always so calm and in charge. Well, there were times when he got mad, on those 12 days, and it was upsetting to me because I had never seen that side of him. And it didn't last. He'd get mad and it was always about something stupid. And I wasn't used to that side of him. And it upset me a little bit, but for the most part, really it was the stress of just being on the run and let me get a drink here.
Was he mad at you?
He did get mad at me a couple times, but not directly. He'd get mad because I don't know, I said he needed to slow down when he was driving, and he'd say, I know how to drive, that kind of thing. But
We
I
did
forgot
see
where
the
I was
chase. We
going.
did see the chase that led to the arrest when you guys
Mhm.
crashed into a tree. Um, were you injured in that accident? Was he injured in
Neither
that
one of us
accident?
was injured. I had the
Yeah,
wind knocked out of me, and I was bruised and I was sore, but no broken bones and no stitches. So
right.
we were lucky.
I wanted to ask you, Toby, if you had one thing to say to Vicky White, what would you say to her? What advice would you give to her at this time? They're on the run, 8 going on
Mhm,
9 days. Do you have any
mhm.
advice that you would give to
Yeah, I
Vicky
would
White?
tell her to get away from him and turn herself in somewhere because, you know, that whole arrest thing is dangerous. That whole car chase and that arrest, it's a dangerous place to be. And, you know, especially we had guns too. And when the police know you have guns, they come in, you know, like ready to shoot. And
Right.
it's a powder keg. You know, if we just blinked wrong, either one of us could have been shot. And and that's not something I'd ever want to go through again. So I would say, you know, walk away, find somewhere safe and turn yourself in because the end when it comes is dangerous.
Hey, can I ask you something? By the way, you don't have to answer if
Thank
you
you,
don't want
Toby.
to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But I wanted to ask you something, and if you don't feel comfortable, I get it, because a lot of people are concerned if you ever felt threatened by him now when you were finally with him. So, I mean, obviously there were physical encounters. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how was that? Knowing that, you know, now you're out on the escape. Now you have this person who, you know, was a convicted, was involved in a murder. Let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
Having that first physical interaction with the inmates. You didn't have any in the prison or the jail. You didn't have any in the prison, right?
Right.
So how long was it when you were on the loose that you had your first physical interaction? Was it on the first night?
Yes.
How did
Yeah. And you know, honestly, that was the best part of our whole escape. I mean,
there it is. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. I mean, it is what it is.
I mean, that was the best part of our relationship, really. Yeah.
All right. So I mean, I was just.
Can I just ask though? Can I just ask what did you say to your husband before you left? Like that morning that you were going to go.
Here's a couple of odd things, funny things, I guess. But so like a week before the escape, my phone rang or my phone buzzed, and my husband got my phone out of my purse and looked at my message, which, you know, he never does, but, and I don't think he should, but anyway, and the message said, "Good morning, baby. I love you." And he brought the phone up to me and he said, "Who is this?" And I said, "I don't know that number. You know, I guess they had a wrong number." And he said,
"Oh my.
Well, I'm not worried because you're not sexually capable of having an affair."
Oh.
And I thought, I'll show you. I mean, you know, that was the day when I said I'm doing it, you know, but anyway.
Well, would you actually, Toby, I'm sorry. So two things here. So we did on the cover that you were manipulated by love, but would also it be a push from your husband?
Yeah.
What had a stronger, where was the stronger pressure coming from? The love that you had for him or the push from your husband?
That's interesting. I think the push from my husband kind of sealed the deal.
Yeah.
But then the night before the escape, I was sitting up writing my Safe Harbor newsletter, my prison dog newsletter, which I did every week. And I felt like I had to send out the one for that week before I could escape because I couldn't leave a job undone. And so I was sitting up late working on my newsletter. And this is a 10-page newsletter I sent out each week. And my husband said, "Well, I'm going to go to bed." And he started walking up the stairs and he said, "Good night." And I looked up at him and I said, "Goodbye." And then I went, "Oh," I said, you know, but he didn't catch it. He just went on to bed. So.
Wow. Wow. Just the value of that one word.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if we'd even think of it. Like, did your husband ever have an inkling during this whole time that you were going to just leave him in general?
I think he thought something was going on, but he couldn't figure out what.
Now the next part is, and to kind of start wrapping, we're going to talk about the well, we have two parts of the jail time now or the prison time. So once you got caught, you know, how nervous were you? Did you expect what was going to happen? How would you?
So Anthony, I don't mean to cut you off. So Toby, exactly how did the police, other than you giving up that address, how did you guys know they were coming, and how did that wild chase start?
It was crazy. So we didn't know that they were on to us, but they had been to the cabin earlier that day, and we weren't there. We were in Chattanooga going to an IMAX movie, and when we came out of the IMAX, we went to we stopped at a shopping center and went in a Barnes and Noble, and we came out and we were walking across the parking lot, and the U.S. Marshals who were in charge of the whatever it is, the finding us, they had been to the cabin earlier that day and we weren't there. So their headquarters for this finding us was in Chattanooga, which is where we were. And they had driven back to Chattanooga. It was about a 2-hour drive. And they were sitting in the parking lot at this shopping center in their car discussing what their next step was going to be. And we walked right in front of them on the way to our car. And we didn't know. And we got in our car and they followed our truck and they followed us and we went up the interstate. And they had set up this trap on the interstate where they had blocked the entrance ramp so no cars could get on. And then when we came up over a hill, the whole highway was filled with police vehicles. And, John asked me, he said, Toby, what do you want to do? Because, you're in on this too. And I said, well, if they tell you to pull over, you have to pull over because that's the law. And he said, okay. And he said, I'll pull over if that's what you want. And just then a police car sped up around us and pulled in front of us and slammed on their brakes so that we'd hit them. And it made John mad. And he said, I'm not pulling over now. I'm just going to drive till we run out of gas. And he took off.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And a high-speed chase ensued. And during the course of that chase, were you telling them, hey, slow down, stop? Or did you just kind of put your seatbelt on? And
we had our seatbelts on anyway, but during that whole chase, it was so funny because I couldn't hear a thing. And I knew there was sirens and John was talking and I could see him talking. I couldn't hear a thing. It was like I was in this slow motion tunnel and
tunnel vision.
Yeah. I didn't hear a thing.
Wow. Yeah. Very scary. And it's miraculous that you guys didn't either get killed or get severely injured, because I saw the footage of him being taken into custody and I saw you shortly thereafter, and I didn't see any kind of bumps or bruises or anything like that. So
no.
And the news reporters were actually able to walk right up to you while you were being brought in with the microphones. I know this was back,
it's ridiculous. Yeah.
So
yeah.
But yeah, people were asking, like, how did you guys survive for 12 days? Did you have money put aside? Were you able to take
I cashed in my 401k.
And you're not obviously still with your same first husband, right? You said you
That's
were
correct.
And,
he divorced me. Right away.
Okay. Understood.
Hey, I was gonna. Go ahead, Duty. Go ahead.
Do you still have contact with him, or did he shut you out? No. Okay.
Yeah, he never. We only talked once, and that's when we decided we were getting divorced. But he never, he never answered my calls when I was in jail or answered my letters or anything. So no, we never did.
Understood.
Someone asked. I don't know if I'm going to kind of dig into this one question. I'm assuming. But somebody asked about when you said at the very beginning of the show, so this has been someone that's been following us straight through, that you had cancer. You were diagnosed with cancer, right?
Right.
So I guess when you were diagnosed with cancer, there's probably a fear of, at this point, I don't care anymore. I'm going to take risk. It doesn't matter. Again, being sick, some people tend to do that. Do you think that could have played into a role?
It did somewhat, yes, because it's the whole reason I started the prison dog program, is because I felt like I needed to do something that would make a difference.
You know what we never asked you? Actually, why do a prison dog program? Were you was there something that always kind of made you want to work with the prison population at first?
So when I was recovering from my cancer, there was about 7 weeks where I just didn't even have the energy. I couldn't even read a book because I couldn't hold a book because I was just too weak. And so I spent the whole 7 weeks in a recliner in the living room, and I watched Cell Dogs on Animal Planet. Almost nonstop, just over and over and over. And I thought, now that's something I'd like to do. I think that you'd make a difference if you could do something like that. And I'd always been a dog rescuer. I'd always, helped find homes for dogs and foster dogs and things like that. And so when I got well and I went back to work at the vet clinic, I decided I was going to start a dog rescue program. And then 2 days after I decided I was going to start the dog rescue program, someone from the warden's office at the prison came and asked me if I wanted to start a prison dog program. And I said, well, that's my dream. That's what I've been dreaming of for 2 months now. So
Does that
And you felt,
program
and you
still
felt,
run?
and you felt with your medical condition that with cancer and stuff like that, that this would be some great, a great legacy or a great
Yeah.
footprint that you could have put in place
Right.
before, if God forbid you were to,
Right.
succumb to
You know, I
cancer.
knew I could make a difference in the lives of those dogs.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a
That-
great
that-
thing.
Does that dog program still run?
You know, they closed it last year, so it ran up until last year. But they
But I
changed
wonder
it so only officers could, work inside the prison with the dogs.
I was going to ask, I don't know if you would know this, but did they change any measures after the escape? Like, did they change
Sure.
how they
Mhm.
deal with the crates? Were there any
Yeah,
measures
they
that
did
were-
change. So only officers could go into the prison to work with the dog handlers. There could be volunteers that could work at the adoptions, but they couldn't go into the prison. And they didn't let them drive in to pick up the dogs anymore. You had to walk each dog out on a leash through the
There
regular
it
gate.
is.
Mhm.
All right, so I think wanted to move forward to the jail part, if that's okay, when you
Mhm.
finally get caught. All right, so and I think obviously Connie worked at Rikers, Connie worked at a jail. I never worked at a jail. So what was once you got caught, what was the process from there?
So after the car crash, I convinced them they should take me to a hospital, get me checked, which they weren't going to do. And so they did take me. They said, well, you signed all these papers and one of them was a medical release. I said, I don't know what I signed. You just said sign here. So I signed. And so anyway, they said, well, go ahead and take her to the hospital. So they took me to hospital. And then, the interesting thing is 2 of the marshals came to the hospital to interview me. And when I was released from the hospital, they sent me out with a deputy for a local, a local jail. And we were walking through the parking lot and this black car drove past us and it stopped and it backed up and the passenger door opened and this marshal got out and walked over to me. And he said, Toby, you have a tough road ahead of you, but don't let this be who you are. You need to rise above this.
That was from the
And
marshal?
That was from the marshal that arrested me. Yeah.
That's
And
what my tattoo says. Rise above.
oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool.
Oh,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
what did that mean to you when he said that?
Yeah. It changed my life. I thought if he can believe in me, then I can believe in myself too. And I, so many times when I was in jail and prison, when I was in a bad place, I'd bring that back up in my mind and it would give me strength to go on. It was critical.
Let me ask you a question. Oh, someone did ask if Connie, on a side note, I don't want to click the comments because it's shrinking the screen, but I am reading it. Connie, real quick, someone wants to know if you have a YouTube channel, but you do have the podcast, correct, and a book. Do you mind giving them the shout out on that?
Yeah, my podcast is the Fly Behind the Wall podcast. It's wherever you listen to your podcast. And my book is The Cage Was Her Cocoon, The Journey from Prison Administrator to Entrepreneur. But I actually had a question, Toby, I think your story is amazing. And as I'm listening to it, I'm here just trying to formulate the question so it doesn't come off as, in any way not respectful. But like, what do you say to the folks who may be thinking this person helped someone escape from prison, right? Has come out of prison, went into prison and had served her time and is now writing books and writing curriculum and she's making money off of this horrible thing that she did, right? Like, what do you say to that person or those people who can't understand how we are essentially supporting an ex-inmate who did something really bad?
Ooh,
Right? Because because I feel like we can kind of identify with the manipulation and the process and everything else that came along your journey. But for those people who are just kind of taking it all in and don't really understand the context and everything else that kind of comes into play here. How do we speak to that group of people or those folks?
That's a good one.
Okay. Well, I have a couple things to say to that. First of all, I haven't made any money yet. So I may make some money in the future, but as of now, I haven't made any money. And I have spent about $5,000 putting these programs together. So I'm investing in changing women's lives. And it doesn't matter to me if I make my money back or not. So I haven't yet made any money. And the other thing is, what I write about and what I talk about is not, I mean, when you get my book, there really is very little about the escape in it. Really, what the book's about, what my story's about, and what these programs are about are how to rebuild your life after you've destroyed it. And, you know, that's the lesson I want people to learn, not, you know, how to commit a crime, but it's about how to rebuild your life when you've thrown everything away. And I think that's an important lesson that people can use and need to hear. And the other thing I would say, and this is one of my key points in my book, is that you are not your worst mistake. I mean, none of us are. None of us are ever our worst mistake. I'm 64 years old. I have a whole life of things that I've done and tried to, you know, make the world better. And then there was 12 days where I didn't do something that was that upstanding. And that shouldn't be the one thing that everyone remembers me for. I would hope that some of the other things I do stand above that.
By the way, I think that was a great question by Connie, even a great answer by you. Can I add a caveat to that question? Just
Yes.
to find out, what would have happened if during this escape he did go out and hurt somebody?
Oh, I don't think I could have. I don't think I would have survived that. I don't think I would have been able to get over that.
Was part of your relationship with him when you were at that, you know, the cabin for 12 days, whatever it is, were you also someone in the back of your mind making sure that he never left your sight to hurt somebody else?
No, I wasn't thinking that exactly, but neither one of us ever did leave each other's sight. So I never had to think about that.
I just thought it would be interesting because I know, like, for the Vicky White situation, what we were mentioning is, you know, after you do that, you know, what would happen if the person did commit a crime? Because at that point there, by the way, I mean, thank God it was an escape where the person came back and no one got hurt, but it does change the game if another crime is committed during that escape. And now that can up the charge that's given to you.
That exactly right. Yeah, it could have been a felony murder charge. So, yeah.
Now, I want to go back to that U.S. Marshal. Do you still say? I probably, maybe not, but do you remember that Marshal's name? Or
I never did know his name. I still to this day don't know his name, and I wish I did. He had white hair. That's all I remember.
You know what? Maybe that would be I don't know. I mean, if they get a hold of the show and they're watching it, I think that would be great to have the U.S. Marshal on with you. So if they happen to watch it, maybe through Duty Ron's network, I would
love to be able to talk to him because he really did save my life with that statement.
You think? And Duty Ron, it's got to go on your show, Duty Ron, because you got the tattoo.
I'm going to do my best to try to track him down if he's still alive. I'm hoping that he is. But you know, at the end of the day, she took a very bad situation and put it into a positive. And I commend you, Toby, for it. I think it's fantastic to be able to put your shoulders up and move forward and do something positive. And I know that you'll continue to do things positive. Here you are putting 2 hours of your time, volunteering 2 hours of your time to tell your story, to kind of educate folks who are following Vicky White in the same similar mistakes that she made on maybe a bigger, grander scale, you know, with her releasing an actual person who has taken somebody else's life himself and also shot a dog and killed a dog in the process. This is a really, really bad person.
I'm really afraid for her.
Yeah,
I'm really afraid for her. And I told her, I mean, when I heard that on the news, I was sick to my stomach. You know, I was just, I wouldn't want to be in her shoes right now.
I have a question I want to ask, because obviously you started working with females. You were in a prison setting, you know, so you saw the officers from one perspective. Now you're seeing them from another perspective. So I have two questions here. One is, how did you view the female inmates? But I also want to ask from this other perspective, how did you view the officers that were in their charge? And be honest, we're here to have an honest dialogue.
And how did she acclimate into jail?
Yeah. Good
Yeah.
question, Ron.
I found there were such differences in women's prisons and men's prisons. The women had so little privileges. So in the men's prison, this was in Kansas, the same state ran the men's prison and the women's prison. And I spent a lot of time in the men's prison. And in the men's prison, the men had cable TV. And the guy who ran the cable TV channel was on call 24/7. Because if the TV went out at 2 a.m, he had to be in there within 30 minutes and get it back up so they didn't have a riot. In the women's prison, there was no cable TV. In the women's prison, there was no gym. There was nothing. There were no activities. It was just a warehouse of bodies, really. I couldn't believe the difference. And the same state ran both prisons. And I believe it's because the women don't riot and the women don't stand up for themselves the way the men do. The men demand things and they get it because they don't want trouble. But the women just say, oh, okay, and there were a lot of officers, honestly, that I felt were there because they wanted to have a place in their life where they can control someone. They just really were, that power went to their head and they just wanted to, no, you can't do, they just weren't very human.
Was it a different dynamic? Because obviously you saw the officers deal with the male inmates. Did you see a different dynamic with the officers dealing with the females than you did with the males?
Yeah, I did. They kind of acted like the females were like these grade school children that didn't even need to be related to at an adult level. It was a huge difference. And I spent 15 months at a private for-profit prison, which is the stupidest thing in the world because I fell and broke my leg and it was 10 days before they x-rayed it. One of my roommates, and then when they x-rayed it, it was out of place and it needed to be set and they wouldn't approve me to get my leg set. So, I just have this funky leg.
Toby, what year was it that you were incarcerated?
2006 to 2008. And one of our roommates, where we were when I was in that private for-profit prison, it was freezing cold all the time, freezing cold. And there was black mold growing up the walls. And when you took showers, these black worms crawled out of the shower. It was a horrible place. And it was so cold that we would save soda bottles and fill them with hot water and put them in the microwave to put into our beds at night so we wouldn't freeze to death. And one night, one of the bottles blew up on one of our roommates and she got 3rd-degree burns on her breasts. And they didn't take her to the hospital for a day. And when they took her to the hospital, they called an ambulance and took her to the burn center in Kansas City. Some of the things that, when you have a for-profit prison, then the profit margin and the shareholders become what's important and not the care the inmates get. And that was the worst place I ever was.
That was, I was on Al Sharpton a while ago, MSNBC, and that was our discussion. And basically the main part of the dialogue is human life should not be made for profit. Obviously, I'm a big fan in the work that's done behind the wall, but I'm not a big fan of privatized prisons. But I do want to say, I do respect the officers and stuff that work there. It's not their fault they're working for a privatized facility because some of them need jobs. But obviously, I am an advocate for the profession. I just want people to know that for those that are professional, I do like to think there's more of them than there are not.
Yeah.
The work
I would hope so too.
Yeah, and the work
it's a
that they
tough
do.
job. I would, of course, they wouldn't let me, but I wouldn't want to. I couldn't do that job. It's a tough job.
I just wanted to make sure we're balanced. But again, there are some people that do work in this profession that shouldn't. But let's not. And you didn't, by the way. This is just an added thought on my end.
Right.
Let's not generalize that out. But again, no one did that. No one did that here. I just wanted to add that.
Right. That's true.
So I think
Yeah.
there's a couple of questions we wanted to ask before we wrap it to a close, and it's going to be related to you once you're leaving, because a lot of people are asking more, very interested in the relationship you have with John, and then your new husband, and what's his thoughts of your past. So let's start first, if it's okay, with you get out of prison, you got to reestablish your life. What are the first things that you do to set things up?
So when I got out of prison, the first thing that I did actually was to leave town because I couldn't go anywhere without people pointing at me. And so I moved to Boston. I took a job in Boston and moved to Boston, which is where I met my husband. But then I came back home because my youngest son was dying of cancer. And so I needed to come back to Kansas City. And Chris came with me.
How old was your son when he passed?
He was 17 days short of his 25th birthday.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Sorry
deepest
for your loss.
condolences there. Sorry. So
Yeah.
Sorry
sorry.
for your loss.
It was tough. It was a tough thing.
Let me ask you a question. In how you deal with negative news, did you become stronger inside the prison? So when you got released, when negative news hit you, did you relate to it a little bit differently than you did in the past?
You know, the funny thing is that I've always said that I found my freedom behind bars because for the first time in my life, I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have any deadlines. I didn't have any meetings. I didn't have any appointments I had to be at. All I had was time. And so I decided to take that time and use it to reflect on my whole life and go back through, every minute of my life and figure out the events that I needed to heal from and figure out what I wanted to be in the world and what I needed to do to change myself so that I could live up to what I wanted to be. So
Toby, how old were you when you went into jail? Into
How
prison?
old? 48.
Yeah, 48. So
Yeah.
for 2 years, you were in 2
Yeah.
years, right?
Mm-hmm. 27 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what's unique? It's like you and Connie had to meet each other because Connie wrote a book called "The Cage Was Her Cocoon." It was about breaking out of that cage, and you literally
Yeah.
did that.
Mhm.
So I think there's something there with a collaboration of, because at the end, guys, don't get me wrong, guys, we have to be fair in our discussion. There was something serious behind what you did, and thank
Yes,
God.
it was.
And
Mhm.
thank God it didn't turn out to be a lot worse. But when you come out
Yes.
here and you share a story and you're open and you're obviously vulnerable when you're open, obviously, the
Mhm.
people that could be impacted by this story, if they allow themselves to be open, allow
Mhm.
themselves to kind of say, hey, guy, guess what? No one got hurt. So there's a human error here. Don't get me wrong. We're not
Mhm.
downplaying it, and no one here has downplayed it. But that's the
Mhm.
case. This is a dialogue that no one's having that we all can take something from if
Mhm.
we believe first in the value of the message and then the value of the messenger behind that message.
Mhm.
So first off, thank you for that. And a lot of us here are also asking about, again, the relationship with you and John after this.
Mhm.
I mean, do you regret what you did? Would you do it again? And
Well, here's how I answer that question. So I think that regretting something just puts a lot of energy into something you can't change. So what I rather prefer to do is to look forward. And so I can tell you that the woman I am today would never do what I did before. I have grown and gotten stronger and am confident in myself, and I don't need someone else to make me who I want to be. So the woman I am today would never do what I did, and I would never condone someone doing what I did. But at the same time, I can't wish what happened out of my life because I wouldn't be the strong woman I am today if I hadn't gone through that.
Connie, you have any thoughts on that? Because I know that pretty much relates to what you write. Guys, by the way, if you get a chance, don't forget Connie has that book. Cage Was Her Cocoon. It's a very good book. It's her life story, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I'm listening, I'm like, it's like the story of, it is that transformational story, right? Like, I mean, we've all made mistakes. We, decide, honestly, I would always talk about, many people are just one bad decision away from being on the other side, right? Whatever that decision is. And so, you know, as I'm listening to the story of sort of you coming to terms with what you did, the impact, but then having all of the personal life things happening, the medical issue with your dad, with you going through a divorce. I think the totality of your story, I think, is what's really amazing, that you have the strength to stand, you know, come before whomever, right? Whatever platform you are on, to talk candidly about the experience and what happened. So, you know, I don't really have a question about it. I just, you know, commend you for that bravery to be able to
Thank
do
you.
that, to sort of put the whole life story out there and sort of give people a true backdrop for what was going on in your life then, and even what's, you know, I mean, to hear you lost your son to cancer, so you beat cancer, and then your young son later is
Right.
diagnosed and
Yeah.
and passes from cancer. So I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank
You know,
you.
but it is one of those things where it's like, you know, how do these things impact who you are today, which is what I think is where I am now, right? Like, it's like, you know, this was an awful thing, you know, that she did, you know, here's all the stuff, right? But all these things impacted the Toby we're talking to today, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure that's a different person from the Toby who felt invisible.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is a different Toby. And, you know, I did an interview on Fox 4 News last week, and one of my friends in Kansas City, who I've just been friends with in the last 5 years or so, and she said, "Oh, Toby, they showed that video of you in those black and white stripes in Tennessee, and I just cried." And she said, "You look so broken and so lost and so full of shame." And she said, "I just wanted to reach out and hug you and say, it's going to be okay, because you're going to become Toby Dorr." You know, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. You know, I still, when I see those pictures of me in Tennessee and those black and white stripes in court, I still don't recognize the woman I'm looking at.
Mhm.
You know, I wonder if I could ask another question too. So, when you were at the female jail or the jail, did you ever go to a prison, or you went the?
Oh yeah, I
both?
was in prison. I was in
So,
prison. I was in
did,
state prison and federal prison.
did you ever see any games being employed by the female inmates on staff? And if so, would there, let's say if you did see a female inmate trying to play staff, would you feel like, you know, let me warn staff, because the last thing I want is for them to get caught up in something that I did? Or would you understand why the female inmates are doing it?
You know, for the 15 months I was in the private for-profit prison, only female officers were allowed to be in the female pods. So that was the majority of my time. I spent like 4 months in the state prison and 2 months in the federal prison. So I really wasn't there long enough to be able to see the interactions between a male officer and a female officer.
Well, females could still push on
I
other
mean,
females.
right. I mean, yeah. So I don't remember ever seeing it. There was one time we thought there was an officer that was, you know, interested in some inmate, but I never saw it.
Well, let me ask you this then: if you did see it, would you break the inmate code and try to warn staff to stay away from that
I
inmate that
probably
playing
would.
games?
I wasn't big on the inmate code, so and it didn't.
Just curious. I thought that was a.
Yeah.
Thought that was
So
a good
you were a
question.
model. So you were a model prisoner.
I probably was. I never got a write up. I never got in trouble, so I probably was. Yeah.
You qualify. Yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to just say this. It's an honor for me to be here with you guys. I got to get going because this old man, I got to get to sleep. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm going to if it's okay with you, I want to exchange information with
Okay.
Anthony and have him give you my
Yeah.
number and stuff like that.
That'd be
so
great.
we could plan to do something.
Mhm.
I you know, on your timeline, whenever it's convenient for
Mhm.
you, and
Okay.
I'd love to have you on to talk.
That'd be great. I'd love to be
All right.
on, so that'd be great.
I already
Thank you.
I already shared your contact with Ron. Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
great. Yeah.
All right. And thanks, Ron. We're going to start wrapping it up soon anyway, but thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Connie, Anthony, Toby. Thank you so much for having
Okay.
me. I'm
Thank
honored
you.
to be here.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Take care, man.
Bye.
I thought what we could do, if you guys are okay, before we wrap it up, I thought we can get a few last questions from the audience. We have almost 300 people in this room right now.
Wow.
So I wanted to maybe do some questions with them real quick, and then we'll start slowing it down. I want to give them some respect. But while we look for some questions, anything else you would like to say, Connie? By the way, Connie, if you noticed, Black Rose, a few people here are throwing your book out there. They're throwing your podcast out there. Guys, don't forget also, Miss Dora, you can pre-order her book. It's in the description. It'll be out June 15th. Also check out her website. She does have the manuals for the program that she's trying to facilitate. But Connie, would you like to say anything while I get the questions? Guys, send me the questions so I can ask them.
Well, I just wanted to make sure, Toby, are you okay? Did you need to take a moment? Because I know
No,
we've been
I'm
on
good.
over
I'm
2
good.
hours.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good.
Connie, you make me feel so bad. You know, Connie
Listen, we have to ask.
Can I say what happened today? Let me tell you what happened today. So just to tell you what happened today. So I called Connie and I was thinking about doing this show, and I was actually thinking about tomorrow. And Connie, right in front of my wife, says, tomorrow is Mother's Day.
Yeah.
I mean, if I did not feel, and I said, I knew that. I was just testing you, Connie. I know I'm a mother. Well, you know, but I thought that was, okay. So, so these are going to be some personal ones, but if whatever you can answer, I'd appreciate it. All right. So we got a few. Well, we already know that you do still talk to John, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So we manage that. What do you guys talk about usually? Just,
but it's not talking, it's letters, right?
It's emails. Yeah, it's emails. So, you know, like we talk about my book. Actually, I got an email from him today and he said, "Oh my gosh, have you seen the news?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Has anybody contacted you yet for an interview?" And I said, "A lot of people." So, you know, we don't have long emails, just, you know, short ones, but that's what he emailed me today.
All right, and then the other question is, this is a good one. How hard was it for you to get a job once you got out of prison?
Impossible. Impossible. I never did get a job.
Oh.
When I got out of prison, I couldn't find a job. So I started building websites and I just did my own work.
Wow. Did you what when you got out, what type of job were you looking for?
I even applied at PetSmart to be a dog trainer and they wouldn't hire me.
Now you have to so you have to tell them, right, that you were in for a felony?
Yeah, you have to check the box on the application that you've ever been convicted of a felony. Mm-hmm.
And then would they, and I know they're not supposed to use it against you, but would they ever ask you about it, or they just ignored your request, your application?
That was it. You checked the box and you never heard anything else from them.
I know this is a very personal question. It comes from Canada, Julie LaRosa, and she says, does she have children, which we discussed, and how did they feel about what occurred? How did you reconcile all that with your family?
So I had 2 sons at the time of the escape. I had a daughter that died as a baby. So I had 2 sons at the time of the escape, and my youngest son, you know, died of cancer a year after I was released. And I do not have a relationship with my oldest son.
Oh, from the due to the escape, so they haven't. So what is it that they're not able to forgive? Your oldest son, I mean, what is it that they're not able to look past?
Well, they don't want me to talk about being in prison. They just want me to pretend, you know, just move on.
Really, that's even though right now I think, to be honest with you, the people that go through these stories, if they do truly turn themselves around, they probably have more of an influence than we would because they lived it. I mean, I think it would be great for you to teach an inmate manipulation course. I mean, here I am, as I said, I wrote the book, but Connie, imagine if I brought her to a conference and we were teaching inmate manipulation. I mean, people are going to relate to it because you lived it.
Is your oldest son from your first husband?
Yes, they all are. All my kids were from my first husband.
Okay. So I guess I could see that then, right? Like, especially since the first husband divorced right after the event happened, and so he ended up being a single dad to the kids.
Well, they were adults. They were adults at the time of this game.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they go, yeah. The next question I got is, how did she tell her certain Mermaid? Can you send that again?
Oh, my husband now? Is she asking about my husband now?
Oh, it says, how did she tell her certain, maybe, about the jail escape when they met? Okay, good deduction.
Yeah.
That's probably what she meant.
So, I worked with Chris, and I should have had him come on because he could have told you. But and that this story's in the book actually. But one of their construction workers had gotten arrested, and Chris and his boss, who was my boss, were talking about, maybe they should go. He was in jail a couple hours away, and they were talking about maybe they should go and see what it would take to get him out of jail, see what the charges were. And Chris said, well, I think I'll just write him a letter. And I said, well, if you're going to write him a letter, you should know his inmate number to put on the letter, because sometimes they don't get to him if you don't have an inmate number. And he said, now, how would you know that? And so I told him, well, I've been arrested. And that's all I said. And then the next day he came in, because he went and Googled me, and then came in the next day. He said, now we need to talk, and he wanted to hear the whole story. And he said, now that's a story, and he just thought it was a great story, and he loved it. And so I don't know. It never bothered him.
So, and then let's see if we can wrap it up. I want to see if I have any more questions here. Let's see, just bear with me. Maybe next time we'll have your husband talk. We could talk about it.
Yeah.
If Chris is around, he can come in and say hi. We're always available.
Chris.
Oh boy.
Hey, why not?
Are you here, Chris?
Let's see. How long? This is a good question. Why we wait if he decides to come? Hey guys, if you want to see Chris, tell me yes or no. If there's any questions you have for Chris, tell me yes or no. But one more.
They want to
how
see
long
you. Here he comes. He's coming.
Hold on.
He's coming. There he is.
All we hear is good things about you, Chris.
They want to know how you can let me talk to John and what you thought when you learned I was a felon.
I don't have any choice.
That's not true.
So, by the way, let me see if I can make this a better box there. Yeah. So everybody's saying hello right now. I don't know if you guys can see it. But hey, Chris, before you go, where you going? Is he coming back?
He's grabbing a chair.
Probably get a chair.
Hold on, Chris.
He's getting a chair.
They all like him already.
Yeah,
hey, Chris,
he's awesome. I tell you, he's awesome.
Chris, by the way, all we heard. All we heard was great things about you, by the way. I mean, truly great things. You definitely have a woman that loves you. You're a big part of her turning around. What was it when you first met her and she told you what she did? How did that, how did you take that?
I've been through a lot myself, so I'm not the type of person to start off with judgments. I'm more the type of person to start off with giving second chances and understanding that we all make mistakes. And so Toby's mistake was a big one, but it's no different in my book. It's no different than anybody else's mistake. I think everybody deserves second chances, and we all need to escape our prisons. So,
did she volunteer, Chris? Did she volunteer the information for you, or did you find out accidentally?
Well, kind of interesting. I was a construction worker at the time, and I was a supervisor, and one of my workers had been apprehended by the police. And I was going to visit, and I thought that I might reach out to him by letter. And I was talking about sending him a letter in jail, where he was in jail up in Maine. And Toby spoke up and said, well, you're going to need the inmate number, or it's not going to get to him. And I thought, inmate number? How the heck do you know anything about inmate numbers, And so she she didn't say much more than that, but she thought about it a little bit. I think maybe, did you tell me that you were a
I
felon
think
at
I
that time?
said I did time. I think I told
Maybe
you that,
something like that, but it was
yeah.
about the end of the conversation. And then that night I went to the internet to go and it was a blossoming flurry of hits that came back when I put her name in. So she was all over the internet. She had 30,000 hits or something like that. And I was like, holy cow, what kind of bee's nest have I stepped into? So
How long were you guys involved before you found out?
Well, I only knew him for like a couple weeks when he found out. And then we were friends. Actually, we were friends and we shared an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, and for like 8 months. And then our relationship changed and we ended up getting married.
I don't know about you guys, and I don't know what you guys have already talked about tonight, but God's running the show. And if it weren't for that, if God wasn't running the show, I don't think that Toby and I would have stuck together. But at every turn, God was telling me she's right for me, and God was telling her that I'm right for her. And we need each other. We need each other desperately. We still do. And without each other, I was lost. I was in a lot of trouble myself, just spiritually and emotionally and everything else. And I needed saving, and Toby saved me. She likes to be a savior. If you haven't heard, she likes to help people escape their prisons. So I had my own set of prisons, and she helped me through that. And she had a different set of prisons that she was still dealing with that I helped her through. And ta-da, we have a book today.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think she knows now saviors do have boundaries, though.
Yes.
You know, hey, Connie, I know you would love to ask Chris a question as well, because this is interesting now. Now we feel like it's guys, hold on. It's Oprah and Dr. Phil.
Oh, oh my God. I mean, I think first I just want to say thanks for, being willing to just pop on. I know we didn't plan for you to come in, so thanks for doing that. I mean, I feel like, once you had all the information, well, based on what was on the internet, like, how do you then navigate through the conversation with her, like understanding the details of exactly what she did and like where you are? Like, how do we come to an agreement that, you know what, yeah, we'll go see John also? Like, I feel like it's just a lot, right?
Right. But I'm a bull in a china closet. I jump right in and I started asking her questions right away. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, by me asking questions and not being put off by the idea that she was a felon and that she had some pretty heavy duty mistakes in her life, that the fact that I wasn't put off by it made it easy for me to just go ahead and ask all the questions in the world. And I didn't hold anything back. I was just asking her all the questions. And I think that spirit that I brought to the conversation at that time kind of also made Toby feel a little more comfortable that, well, if he's okay with it, I'm going to go ahead and tell him he's asking the questions. And so it took all of 87 seconds for us to get through the lion's share of the conversation. So yeah, we knew, and it's good. I think people that have.
You're a real man. Somebody just.
Oh, you saw that? Yeah, Toby.
I think people that have had trouble in their lives, like I have and like Toby has, if you come through it on the other side and you learn from it. Now, people that don't learn from it don't quite carry the same type of, I don't know what you call it, character maybe, but if you do learn from it, I don't care where you've come from. If you've learned from the mistake that you've made, you get to a point where nothing phases you. You have heavy armor on. If you've lived through the worst of it. So I didn't quite go to prison, but I'm every bit as much a felon as Toby is. I just made a lot of really stupid mistakes when I was young, and I paid dearly for it. And it was a good thing that Toby was so willing to be a savior at that point. So
somebody just asked, I forgot what they asked, but how did she help you? So I'm going to tell the boat story.
okay.
So we kind of look at it this way. I mean, Chris literally and figuratively saved my life. I had a stroke right after we got married, and he got me to the hospital, and I walked out of the hospital 2 days later with no effects. And that wouldn't have been the case if he hadn't been so quick. But Chris is the keel to my boat. So he keeps me from tipping over. I have a tendency to get emotional and go this way and go that way. And Chris keeps me right on the straight and narrow. And I'm Chris's anchor. Because when I met Chris, he didn't even have a home. He was sleeping in somebody's basement. And so I've given him a home and stability and security in his life. So together, we're unsinkable.
Unsinkable.
Yeah.
Okay.
That could be the name of your next book.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yep.
mean? Being that unsinkable boat. Connie, you have anything you would like to say in closing, Connie?
I would just like to say it was great being able to talk to you, Toby. I really appreciate you coming on, Chris. Like being able to see sort of this story from the other side, right? Because we're usually looking at it from, here's the video. Let's look. Where did things go wrong? Where did things break down? All the speculation about things that we think may have happened. So it was really just, I think, amazing to be able to talk with you and hear from you exactly what was going on at the time and understanding the context, the emotions, just all of that. So I thank you for just coming on and being willing to be so transparent.
Thank you. That's kind of been my motto all along, is to just, tell my story, because I never know who my story is going to reach. And so if I don't take an opportunity to tell it, I might miss the person who really needed to hear it.
Yep.
You know what's funny here too for me is that obviously I'm on the custody side still. I started as an officer, worked my way to admin, but I also oversaw programming for a while. And what I mean by oversaw is I helped facilitate the programs. I oversaw like social different departments. They're the experts, and I learned another side. I have to, in order for me to believe in the work being done behind the wall. Someone asked the question, like, can prison really change people? I believe in the work that's being done behind the wall. That means if I believe in the work that's being done behind the wall, I also have to believe that people change, or that's a discredit to the people that are doing that job.
Right.
So, and that was a wake up call for me. I mean, Connie opened me up to that as well. Different perspective, because she does represent the civilians who have a purpose, and and obviously in safety and security, there's that ultimate consequence. And because we're so you can't fail at certain levels. Like for us, when you did that, the perspective would be that you chose a side. And it's funny because when it comes to a mistake, some people make mistakes that just have deeper consequences, and then you're looking at the consequence and not so much the person that did it. I think there's a perspective there where now when you get to meet the person, it's like, okay, well, is it hard to forgive the person for what they've done? That's subjective. That's up to the people that actually can listen to it. I think for me, in order for me to do what I do, in order for me to go around, in order for me to write a book on manipulation, in order for me to teach people, I have to be able to present all perspectives. I do. I can't go out there and be hardcore and not see a victim, again, not in an effort to minimize the consequence, but to kind of see where we can look at this from all perspectives. And then for you to come on and have this dialogue and to be honest and to answer everything that was asked of you by this audience, as curious as they are, and I hope we'll be able to have more dialogue like this one day. I think the end result is this. I also have to swallow who I am and my pride, because the dialogue and the message you're given is greater than me. So however I feel about what you did, I want you to know this dialogue wasn't about judgment, it was rather about the message that had to get out. And the message will impact people, and the message will change lives. So yes, you made a bad mistake, or in my case, you committed a crime. I can be firm like that too. But at the end, if we can learn something from it, if there's someone that's close to getting caught up, and all of a sudden you're telling that story, it's like, wow, You know what I mean? This is something that I don't want to find myself do. So if I can ask you one thing before you give your closing, what if you could speak directly to Vicky White right now? Now that you lived it, you know, if you could speak to her right now, what would you tell her to do? What does she need to hear?
I would tell Vicky to find a way to turn herself in somewhere that's safe and to, you know, get away from Casey White and go turn herself in, because, you know, I think I said it before, that arrest, when it comes, is a violent, dangerous place to be. And she's better off just turning herself in somewhere and not having to go through that, because I'm not sure she'll come out of it, or he will either.
And that's the scary thing. We have to ask ourselves, guys, what consequences in our minds are just so unforgivable that we wish death to the people involved. And again, that's, you know, that's something that, again, is subjective. So just in closing, any last words, Toby?
Well, you know, the whole premise of my program, you're going to love this, but my tagline is escape your prison, because I think we all have prisons, and I think we've created them ourselves. And I think if I had had the strength and courage to escape from my prison before I met John Maynard, I would have never been drawn into an actual prison escape.
That's powerful. You know, as I said, I mean, just in the long run, it was a pleasure having you. Does Chris have any final thoughts before he leaves?
Chris, you got any final thoughts?
We didn't forget about you, Chris.
Well, I kind of had I had an inkling that Toby was going to start showing her books, and
I've already showed them.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Okay,
good. You know, you were talking about Vicky, and I'm really concerned about Vicky, because what she's dealing with, I know from all the experience. Toby and I have gone over her story 10,000 times, and we understand her story so inside and out, and all the tiny little, the nuanced relationship details between two people. And with Toby and John being on the run for those 12 days, is it 12 days now for Vicky?
Yeah,
like today, or
yeah, because it was 2 Fridays ago.
So I think it might be 12 days.
I think so.
Yeah, today might be 12 days. And now from here forward, it's hard to know how Vicky and what's his name? Casey. So Vicky and Casey, I don't know what they're experiencing from here forward, but we can pretty much guess that most of the stuff that they're dealing with for the last 12 days since they went on the run is probably pretty similar to the same stuff that John and Toby went through. I think that she's probably getting really tired, and she's probably getting to a point where she's starting to realize just how serious this situation is, and that there is no way out. They will get caught. And what bothers me more than anything else is what Toby was saying, is that final moment when they finally get caught, all it takes is just a little twitch, a twinge, a word, just something, any little tiny thing. And when there's so many people on edge, and all it would take is for one of those officers to just make a slight mistake, even just tripping in the woods and shoot once, and then the whole thing is going to come out undone. You know, and I want to see that. I want to see tomorrow morning, I want to wake up and have a news broadcast that it all came to a peaceful ending, and that they have them in custody, you know, like it was with Toby and John, without all the violence, because they are right on an edge here that can't be any more dangerous. And I guess the most I can say is I pray for them.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys coming. I'm sure we're going to have more dialogue. Duty Ron will definitely be calling you, and then hopefully he'll have me join the dialogue. And when your book comes out, I'll be happy to promote it. And I do wish you the best of luck in changing lives. I mean, if it's a great program, I'm sure you're going to have people that are going to look into it right now. I know Connie may even find some interest in that as well. And again, for us to talk to you, it is a great experience. And I'm hoping that one day when people, hopefully they watch the video, they actually find value behind the message, because that's the key. And again,
hope
thank
so
you guys.
too.
Thank you guys very. I just want to have a closing thought with Connie, so I'm just going to wave goodbye to you guys.
Okay.
And,
Thanks.
No problem. And I'll text you the link once it's done.
Okay. Thanks.
Connie,
Take
are
care,
you a
guys.
mom?
Up.
Are you a mom?
Yes, I
Connie?
am. Yes.
All right. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care, guys. Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, Connie, I just wanted to have a closing thought with you real quick.
Sure.
Hey, guys, this is just me and Connie real quick. And I just want to have a closing thought. So we're pushing over almost at 3 hours, but I wanted to have something I wanted to ask you. How do you balance? Because you know me, okay? So I'm doing my best here, okay? I'm doing my best. You're very proud of me. I know you are. You know, Connie was texting me on the side, and I thought I did very well. But Connie, let me ask you something. How do you balance seeing the victim versus seeing the criminal?
It's very difficult. I think so. One, you could see the humanity in her, right? Like you could see that she was in a very vulnerable place. And I don't know that she knew she was being taken advantage of. I mean, yes, I know she knew she was doing the wrong thing, the cell phone, the breaking out wrong, right? But I think when you are in that vulnerable space, when you are having suicidal thoughts, when you are feeling unloved, when you are in this empty relationship, you know, inmates will always find a way to fill that. So it is the understanding of what was going on with this individual, but also understanding the power that an inmate can have when they identify their target and they're grooming their target, right? And so I think it was very interesting for us to be able to see both sides of that in the moment. And really, you do have to take off your judgment hat, your safety security hat, like all the alarms that are going off in our brain as the stories being told. I think that's it, right? This is an educational journey for us, right? We've not talked to someone who helped someone escape, who is now outside after serving their time and is doing something productive with their lives, right? Like, because I think that's also the golden nugget in her story, essentially, in that she was able to do all of what happened, sort of survive everything that was transpired, that she doesn't see herself as a victim. She does take the ownership, but also I'm going to take this story in this journey to help empower others who might have been in where I was when I first met John, which allowed me to go down this road, right? Which I think that's what I've been looking at. Like, there's two sides to this. Inmate is going to do what they do. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form surprised about John, right? He found his target. He groomed his target. He took advantage of his target, right? So there's no surprises there.
I still don't think she sees that, though, at all. So my question to you, Connie, on this, and by the way, guys, just so you know, this is inmate. I can't do this. This is one of them. And this is the other one. Connie, let me ask you a question. When it comes to forgiving someone as a whole, can you forgive the person without forgiving the act?
Can you forgive yes, you can. I think it's something you have to be intentional about. Like, you have to decide, like I was watching something the other day, and old couple who decided, like, they were like, listen, you've got to decide that you're going to love your partner every day, right? Like, when you hate them, like, you decide. And I feel like in this instance, I think because we are so close to the industry, to the profession, that it's hard to dismiss the fact that in any other light, we would have seen this person as a traitor, right? This is someone who worked inside, who had access, who helped an inmate get out, which is probably the worst thing you could do. Like, we know bringing in contraband is high on that level where we don't have any tolerance for it, but helping someone to escape, it's like awful. Like, how could you do this, right? But then to sit and talk to the person to understand what was going on with that person and how and why John even had a chance, right? Which I don't think is like, how would we combat that aside from having all of our institutional rules and regulations in place, right? Because like, you could do all the training, right? We could make sure she knew that all these things were wrong, and it could be very explicit somewhere, like you can't do this, and that, right? But I think her being in there, and this is probably the best way to say it, her being emotionally handicapped by her history, by her life, I think really set the stage for any inmate, quite frankly, who could have been as smooth and charming possibly as John, who found a way to identify with her, to establish that familiarity, to do all the things that he did, which, it's hard to, I think, reconcile that she did this thing, but you also know that, so she's a different person. Like, all those things made her who she is just now, who we just saw. And I think we have to be okay with that. I don't think it's necessary. Like, it doesn't matter whether we can come to terms with it, right? It doesn't change the fact that she has done what she was supposed to do.
Yeah, I think right. I think in my career, again, and I say this because I can't forgive the act. I don't think Connie can. I can't. That's a serious threat to our safety and well-being, and it kind of relates to my sworn oath to protect and serve, right? So we have to stand on the opposite end of that, and we have to stand on that with no forgiveness. I'm being honest with you guys. That's how we're taught. Having said that, there was a point during the dialogue, and guys, when I say this, I want people to know it's not to minimize what someone has done, but I want to be open and honest with that. Is I did see a criminal shift to a victim. I did see that. But again, in the back of my mind, the criminal was first, don't get me wrong. But I also saw the shift to a victim, which gave me a chance to see the player who was responsible. Did we have a man that took advantage of a woman because she was that vulnerable? But was the woman foolish when she let the inmate know how vulnerable she was? I mean, to me, that's a bigger concern. But again, do you think it was the foolishness of her not knowing what she was doing that led to the game and him taking advantage of it? So
I was going to say, because she didn't even know, right? Like, she didn't know, which is where I think we hold some responsibility, right? Like, she did not know that revealing all this personal information would have been to her detriment, right? And I think it does do a disservice when you have a volunteer come in and they only get 2 to 3 hours of training, right? Like, I think it does come back to that. And in this instance, like she said, she wasn't a regular volunteer, right? She was all over the place. There was no controlled movement with her. There was no escorted movement with her, which that in of itself put her in a very sticky situation, right? Like, where she was ripe for the taking, essentially.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of concerns here, guys, before we come to a close. I think the couple of concerns is that so you do have the disposition of an individual, who they are when they come in. Are they so blinded by the want to help that they're willing not to see anything else outside of my importance to help that individual? And am I helping the individual because I'm directly helping the individual, or am I really doing my job as prescribed by the agency? And that's what I was trying to get at before. It's like, I'm helping the inmate, yes, but within those parameters. But having said that, I still think that for civilians, for volunteers, non-uniform staff, whatever it is, there also should be a reminder in the environment of how serious it is amongst the people you're working with. I mean, I know for me, in my experience, the slamming of the cell door would be an immediate reminder, because you got to remember something, guys. Manipulative inmates want to make you forget your prescribed role, and part of that is based on the environment you're in. If you have a very complacent environment, very little is going to remind you of what that role is that you're supposed to be doing. So I think that the environment was very forgiving, which aided the inmate more than it aided her. So that's part of the dialogue here is, do we have an environment that really aids the inmate in this game, or do we have an environment that helped her? And I see it as the environment was very lax and allowed these inmates to directly come up to her, build this dialogue, and again, no training.
Building relationship with her, right? And I think that's it. Like, because we have dialogue all the time with inmates, right? But it's the extent of the dialogue. It's how personal or impersonal the dialogue is. It's the content of the dialogue, which, you know, how does she even have enough safe space to reveal personal information without someone else saying something to her like, oh, you shouldn't say that. Oh, you shouldn't be talking to the inmates about stuff like that. It just, I mean, I think we could go over and over just how the system failed. I think Todd made a statement in here, like she had to know what she was doing was wrong. And she said it. She said, I knew the cell phone was wrong. I knew that helping him was wrong. But she didn't think anything about talking about what was going on in her personal life.
And
right?
you know
Which is a problem.
But you know what's funny too? I agree. You know what's funny, guys? You notice it could be the environment, especially when the prison implements the things afterwards. You know, I mean, because think about that. I mean, it's a little reactive, but having said that, they know they're taking some onus to that. You know, it's like, okay, guys, this is what happened, and this is. But hopefully, when they do it, though, they don't just look at the security and safety measures. Hope they're looking at the deeper things, because there are deeper things that allowed it, which would include a training of the civilians. I bet you that probably not even went in anybody's minds. Like, hey, guys, we got to get the safety, because they're so worried about the physical escape, the outcome. Right. Very rarely do people ever worry about the process that it took to get to that point. You know, it's like, okay, we have an escape. What do we do to stop the escape? Well, what started it? It wasn't.
But just imagine, she was in a facility for 16 months.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It didn't just start when he was put in the
crate. Right. She was there a long time with no training, just interacting. And if it wasn't that inmate, it could have been any inmate, because that she was there a long time with no supervision, with no escort, and still is just talking like she would be talking to her friends, right? Not ever acknowledging that these are not your friends. Right. You're sharing personal information that will be used against you. And you know, it's just one of those things where, like, you know, hindsight is 2020. And I think, yeah, we know corrections 101, like there's things that you just don't do. But then when you get someone who comes in who's just this gullible, right, or who's just this willing to help, or who just is willing to overextend themselves in any way, you start to see how vulnerable our system is.
Yeah, and guys, I like what Nitin says. She said maybe personality profiles should be done for prospective corrections. I agree with that, but remember, guys, situations matter too. Situations can change how you react to them. You know, I mean, we may think that we have this defined route in how we deal with things, but a situation can easily change that depending on how severe that situation is. And as I said, in closing here, and I guess Connie could get that one last, we might as well just do another set of closing thoughts. I just wanted to get that question out before we really fully came to a close, but I wanted to do it. Nothing bad was said, just, you know, separate from the person hearing it. But guys, just want to mention something, guys, here is that, you know, manipulation could happen to everyone. The reason why we had the dialogue today was let people be aware of the process, because I'll guarantee you the facility is focused more on the outcome, and we're more focused on the interesting part. Like, again, what this book has is developing the relationship that leads to where that person believes that their loyalty, in my mind, has switched. I'm more loyal to the inmate than I am to the agency. And at that point here, you know, I'm out. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. If we don't remind people of their importance of where that loyalty needs to be by supporting them. I mean, she worked in an isolated area. How many times did we visit her? How many times did we remind her that she's more connected to us than the inmate? Because we're just letting her do her thing and we don't interact with her. Her interaction most of the day is going to be with those inmates. Again, I'm not minimizing what she's done, but think about it, guys. I mean, you know, if you think about it like in a classroom, when you go in the classroom, the first person you talk to is the person next to you. You know, it just is what it is. You know, it's the person that's most immediate.
I mean, because I'm just thinking too. So the same way you said, who else is she going to talk to? There could be that thought that, you know what, she's spending all her days with the dogs, right? Like they may not be thinking that she's interacting with the inmates as much, right? She's there for the dogs. That's the dog lady. Their
first
process.
Commonality. The first commonality.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first commonality. And you know what's funny? I wonder when the inmate first saw her, if his interest was really about the dog or about her. I mean, to go right up to a civilian and not be concerned about shaking their hand. I mean, to me, if any inmate, that means that the environment itself is lax. Because I know in my facility, no inmate would walk up to any civilian and shake their hand. So obviously, at one point, it's permissible, probably through complacency and bad practices. Connie, I promise you we can wrap it up, guys. Connie, any closing thoughts for the audience here?
No, this was really great. You know, I think for us, we continue to learn and see other sides of corrections all the time, you know, seeing the perspective, hearing her out, you know, also, you know, I think it's still a little unsettling that she may not see that she was being manipulated in any way, that he really loved her at the time. But I'm trying to move past that because it's her feeling and I don't need to validate it. I'm moving on. But also this was great. This was a great conversation, great everything. And I'm glad that you called me an hour before the show and said, hey, listen, right? And that I could do it, you know. And I wish everyone on here happy Mother's Day. Just enjoy life, like be thankful, right? Like that we're all good and we're hopefully all in a safe space. And, you know, see you guys next time.
Wait, I just want to say something. Hold on. I got my closing thoughts too, Connie. So, guys, I just want to say before we close, let me just show you this. I don't know if it matters, but I hit my 20,000 mark.
Woohoo!
20,000 subscribers. Trust me, YouTube will find out by tomorrow and then take out a few hundred. You know what I mean? But at least at this moment, happy Mother's Day to me. Well,
yeah, no.
it could be
Happy
here.
Mother's Day to Deanna.
Or I can give that to my wife as a gift. Hey, babe, 20,000 subscribers.
She's not interested in that as a gift.
Hey, yo,
No,
You sure?
I'm positive.
Well, she'll probably say she's proud. Where's the flowers? All right, guys, this was great, guys. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Couldn't have done it without you guys. And what we'll do is we'll try to see if we could work on a show like this at least once a week. There's some staff I want to bring on. I know we just did that show with Wendy Callahan and Rosie, the officer that was practically raped on the unit. I think it would be great to have a live interaction with them. And I, you know, again, it's the dialogue here. You know, we couldn't do without you guys. So I want to say I love you guys. Stay safe. And remember, guys, the content we put up here is usually related to the correctional field. But if you do, Alicia could tell you, we talk a lot about just working together as one. So there's a lot of useful advice here, even just deep thoughts that come from, even though it's within the profession, it could be applied to all areas of life. Do you know that this inmate manipulation book was originally picked up by Amazon as a parenting guide? So some of the practices in prison could be applied to the real life. You know how many times I tell my daughters to lock it in?
They don't listen to you.
Well, because you know what it is? You know what it is? They don't believe in my write-ups. All right, guys. Love you guys. Stay safe.
Oh, God.